Hey friends, my name is Jackson and welcome back to my channel, which I know not found. So, they fixed the problem. The only thing is they need to have a contractor come in because they had to cut a hole like under my sink and stuff. So, they need to have a contractor come in to seal that off and to fix that. It's not what I found out is that it's a contractor to seal the hole, not the contractor that can fix the mice problem that can seal off all the places where the mice are getting in. So, I'm looking into some other options on that, and right now I'm looking into exterminators, and I'm probably going to call a couple of places and ask them exactly what they do to get rid of the mice. And I found this humane exterminator in Newmarket, which and I found this humane exterminator in the town in which I live, so I wouldn't get the so they won't kill the mice. And it says they also like and I was looking up stuff about exterminators, and apparently part of their job is to like seal off entry points where the mice are getting in and make sure the mice can't get back in. So that's what I'm looking into, and that's what I'm trying to get my mom to agree to. We can ask Uncle Mike or my grandpa for money because um I don't have the money to do that. Obviously, I don't have the money. My mom doesn't have the money. So, as far as that goes, we're gonna just leave it up in the air and then but I'm looking into some stuff and I am trying to convince my mom to get an exterminator. She did set a couple of other traps. She got like the snap traps, the ones that snap on their head and then kill them instantly, which sucks that I have to do it that way. But they keep coming back, and we tried methods to deter them first, and they kept coming back, and they were chewing through my trash bags. Like a couple of days ago, they literally ran across my floor so they could eat from my trash bags, and I had to clean up all the mouse poop and Lysol the floor and clean up with the mop and stuff, and it was exhausting. It's like a lot of work. And then they came back again like 20 minutes later, so I heard them chewing at my bag, and then I went out and there was a fucking mouse there, and they keep chewing into the trash bag. So I had to start putting the trash out into the hall. So I'm gonna talk to my mom when she comes here, and we're gonna talk about options. And I'm gonna try and convince her to get an exterminator. As for my support worker situation, I'm not gonna get into that right now, but I am gonna say that I told my mom the story, and she thinks that because I have trauma that I'm not right about this, that I think something happened when it didn't, even though I know exactly what happened. So I'm trying to convince her to side with me right now. Anyway, I just want to read some chapters, and I would like to post more than one or two at a time. Like I've been posting one chapter at a time. I'd like to post more than one chapter. Um, and yesterday I was gonna record like three or four, and then it turned into a whole thing, and I ended up not. But as far as um, as far as getting a bunch of chapters done, it's only 4 o'clock, so I feel pretty confident in saying that I can probably read about 3 chapters today, before it gets too late. So, and if I can't, I think I'm gonna upload when I have 3 or 4 chapters ready like, and not just upload a chapter or even two because I want to do a little more. And I was hoping to do like 6 chapters, but I feel like it's going to take me too long and I want to upload something sooner. Also, I'm going to be up early tomorrow in the morning, so yeah. I'm going to be up early tomorrow in the morning, and me and my mom are going to the movies as well. So we're going to go see Wonka. I'm really excited, especially since this is the second movie I've been to this week. And I was really insistent about it because every time I leave the house, my legs started feeling like jello. So, we're gonna talk to my physiotherapist. I have an appointment on Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember. One of my appointments is on Wednesday, one of my appointments is on Thursday. I also have a doctor's appointment, so one of them's on Wednesday, one of them's on Thursday. I'm not really sure. But I feel pretty confident in saying that I can probably read 3 or 4 chapters. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that it's been a stressful couple of weeks, and I am so happy to be getting back to my life. And the landlord did contact me saying the contractor wasn't coming today, but he said not to assume that the contractor isn't going to be here before Monday. So I guess we'll see what happens. And until then, I'm just gonna do what I want. I'm just gonna do this because this is what I really want to do, and I'm having a lot of fun. Anyway, I'm gonna read chapter. I'm pretty sure we're on chapter 101. Yep, I was right. I can't believe I read 100 chapters of this book. It took like more than 2 years. I don't know exactly how long it took, but okay. Chapter 101 Nemesis. Blood dripped steadily into the sink, coating the bowl in bright red ribbons. The lights of the emergency vehicles outside flashed through the window. The sound of the sirens were distorted by the ringing in his ears. Closing his eyes, he sighed. He remembered this from the last concussion. Digging around, Ignitus found a clean washcloth. Folding it and pressing it to his eyebrow, he staunched the flow of blood. Walking back to the window, Ignitus looked out, watching as the fire truck took off. The ambulance was already gone, and the police cruiser was the last vehicle to leave. By the time the street was clear, blood had saturated the cloth and was steadily dripping down his arm. He added another cloth, and sitting on the couch, he lit the last cigarette in the pack. Taking a drag, he lay back, resting his aching head on the cushion, blowing out a plume of smoke as he waited for the bleeding to stop. Ignitus hated to admit it, but Ash had an impressively fast left hook. He hadn't seen it coming at all. Ash had gotten a good few hits in for sure, but rules dictated that the last one standing was the winner. Considering he'd been a decent enough person to call him a freaking ambulance and wait for it to show up after tossing him out on the street, Ignitus felt the rest of the band would forgive him. Bringing the cigarette to his lips again, he took another drag, only for nothing to happen. Opening his eye, Ignitus looked down at the cigarette in his hand. It had burned down completely to ash. Well, that was a waste, he sighed, checking the time before pushing himself up as he made his way to the bathroom. Slowly he removed the cloth, looking at the inch-long split that now ran through his eyebrow. His eye was already blackening. He leaned closer, inspecting the bloody patch on the white of his eye. Ignitus couldn't remember what had hit him hard enough to do that, though if he had to hazard a guess, his money would be on either Ash's steel-toed boot or the table. Whether Ash would intentionally kick him in the head, though, was another question entirely. Pulling the vanity open, he grabbed the antibiotic ointment, the butterfly closures, and a few other odds and ends, patching himself up. Cleanup took more time than his patch job had. Grabbing Hambo in his leg, Ignitus leaned against the counter, trying and failing for what felt like the millionth time to thread the needle he'd found. He just couldn't get his trembling hands to stop. Finally, feeling frustrated, he put the needle and thread aside. Walking from the apartment, he locked it behind him. Ignitus leaned against the door for a moment. His head was killing him, and every step he took sent a sharp jolt of pain through his head. Climbing into the truck, Ignitus closed his eyes, taking a slow breath. He was starting to get dizzy. Dropping Hambo in the passenger seat, he focused on the road, watching as the street split into two. Rubbing his eyes, Ignitus squinted, trying to focus as he started the truck. He felt drunk, and his head and side ached. Pulling onto the street, he drove, slowly heading up the street to the 24-hour corner store. Sitting on the window bench, Ignitus knotted the final stitch with trembling fingers. He would never make fun of pre-threaded needles ever again. Tugging on Hambo's leg and making sure it stayed attached, he was satisfied. Biting the sting and sticking the needle into the spool of thread, Ignitus walked over, replacing Hambo with Marceline. Reaching down, he felt her forehead frowning. She was still warm. With a wince, he reached down, digging through the bag at the foot of the bed. Taking out pajamas, he walked into the bathroom, shutting the door behind him. Pulling his shirt over his head, Ignitus stared in confusion at the torn dark red patch on his shirt. Turning, he looked down at his side. It was sticky with blood, and spotting it, he felt a wave of nausea. A shard of glass was protruding from his skin. Immediately his memory fired up as he recalled their fight. The crunching sound of the glass frame shattering as they slammed into the wall, knocking it to the ground. Closing his eyes, Ignitus shook the memory away. Ignitus flinched, touching the glass. Taking a breath, he quickly grabbed the piece, sliding the shard of glass from his body, gagging as he did so. Dark red blood began gushing from the wound as it began to burn. With a gasp, he clamped his hands over it tightly, feeling as the blood began seeping from between his fingers. He was lightheaded and dizzy again. He should not have done that. He didn't think the piece of glass would be that long. Darkness crept along the edge of his vision. Not good, not good, not good. Blinking hard, he grabbed his shirt, bunching it up and holding it tightly to his side as the burning increased. Ignitus clenched his teeth, leaning against the counter, trying to stay standing. This hurt so much more than before. His knees were buckling, and using the counter, he lowered himself to the floor as the waves of pain hit harder. His aching head rested against the cabinet. His heart was racing, and his world went black. Mokro. The sound of the phone ringing pierced through the silence. Opening his eyes, Mo winced at the blinding light of his cell phone. Answering the call, he held the phone to his ear. His pillow was calling so sweetly to him, but he ignored it. Yeah? I need a ride. Mo looked back at the screen. The screen said Ash, but he sounded weird. You sound off. Where are you? He asked sleepily, pushing himself up and out of the bed. Memorial Hospital. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Thanks. With that, the call disconnected. Mo was pulling on his jeans when Kate's sleepy voice called over to him. Everything okay, sugar? I've got to give I've got to give Ash a ride. He's at the hospital, he said, walking over to the bed, giving Kate a kiss. Go back to sleep. I'll be back soon, he said, grabbing his keys on the way out. Memorial Hospital wasn't too far from their house. This wouldn't take long at all. Pulling up to the pickup area, Moko stared in shock as Ash walked over, pulling the door open and climbing in. Half of his head was shaved, and the side Mo could see was lined with stitches. What the hell happened? A severe lapse of judgment. Okay, you don't have to talk about it. What's the damage? Fractured jaw, fractured orbital bone, he said, motioning to the bruising underneath his eye. 40-something stitches, likely concussion, and bruised ribs, Ash said with a weak laugh. I got knocked the hell out. But hey, at least he cared enough to know Marshall would kill him if you put me out of action band-wise, Ash said with a shrug, Moko staring at him. Ig did this? Mo asked. Ash said nothing as he looked out the window. The only sound was the car idling. Mo turned back, facing the road as he drove to Ash's place. How'd you get to the hospital? Mo asked quietly. I thought I didn't have to talk about it. That's fair. The silence stretched out again. Got a smoke? Ash asked as Moko nodded, motioning to the glove box. Passing him his lighter, Moko couldn't help but notice the stitches on his fingers, too. The rest of the drive passed in silence, and after watching Ash enter his house, Moko pulled his phone out, sending a text to Marshall. After he called Ignitus, listening to the line ring, it rang through to voicemail twice, and calling again, Mo listened as it picked up on the third ring. Hey, he sounded like he'd just woken up. If he could go home and sleep off a fight that put Ash in the hospital, then he could handle getting bitched out for the next few minutes. It's Ash's fault. It's literally Ash's fault. What the hell happened with Ash? I whooped his ass. His harsh, choppy breathing now was obvious. He could hear Ignitus swearing under his breath and the sound of his pain gasp. Hey, are you okay? Mo asked slowly, taking the street towards Marceline's house and stepping on the gas. Moko wasn't prepared for the answer he got. No, I messed up. It won't stop bleeding. What happened? He asked, pulling into the driveway and running from the car. The glass. I didn't think. I pulled it out. It's still bleeding. There's a lot of blood. Ig, where are you exactly? He asked, taking the stairs up by twos and banging on the front door. Bathroom, in Marcy's room. The door opened, and he was met with a butler who looked more like a henchman than anything else. He looked more than disturbed by Moko's presence at this hour. Quickly, he flipped his phone to speaker. Ignitus needs my help. He's waiting for me. Ig, confirm, he said as the butler stared at him, eyebrows raised. Can you bring into Marcy's room, please? Looking from Moko to the phone, the man nodded, motioning him inside. I'll be right there, Ig. I'm here, so I'm gonna hang up now, okay? Please don't. Don't? He sounded scared, and that bothered Moko. Please? Okay, I won't hang up, he said, turning to the hench butler. How close are we? Right around the corner. Is anything needed? Call for an ambulance. He said it's bleeding. It has to be bad, he said, watching as the man opened a door. Mo, is that you? He could hear him from across the room, the thin stream of light coming from the bathroom door. Yeah, Ig, I'm outside the door, he said softly, opening the door, hanging up the phone as he entered. The metallic scent of the room was his first clue that something was terribly wrong. Ignitus was sitting on the floor, holding a red shirt against his side, and he looked very pale. Mo knelt down in front of him, and Ignitus grinned. The hand holding the cloth to his side was covered with blood and shaking. From here, Moko understood the severity of the situation. The shirt he'd thought was red wasn't. It was completely saturated in blood. Looking up, he spotted a bloody shard of glass on the counter and felt his eyes go wide. Holy shit, is that what you pulled out? He asked, now grabbing a towel, covering the bloody t-shirt with it. Ignitus' hand slipping across his as he continued applying pressure to the towel. Do you think you can stand? Moko asked, looking around. He wondered if it would be easier to bring Ig to the ambulance or to have them come here to him. That idea was shot dead in the water as he watched Ignitus, barely able to shake his head as he spoke. No. You know the EMTs are going to wake Marcy, he said, watching as Ignitus nodded, his head dipping. With a gasp, he snapped upright, looking scared. The door opened, the butler entering again. Ambulance is on the way. They'll be bringing him to Mount Auburn. Thanks. Can you get Marceline out of the room, please? Again, the butler nodded, retreating. Keep talking to me, Bud. What happened? Mo asked. Ash, Ignitus said, grunting in pain. He's been stalking Marcy. I went to the apartment to grab something for her, and he was inside messing with her stuff. I snapped and we fought. I know you fought, Ig. Did Ash do this? I don't remember. What do you remember? Flashes, bits and pieces of everything, he mumbled, now truly looking at Mo for the first time. You two look worried. I definitely am, he said. There was no point in hiding it. The phone in his pocket started to vibrate. I didn't know it was that deep. The glass, He trailed off, head dropping onto his chest and his body going limp. Moko gasped, shaking his shoulder. Yo, hello, Ike, you've gotta stay awake, dude, Mo said, patting his cheek. Come on, Ike, wake the fuck up! Looking down, he panicked, grabbing the towel from the floor, holding it firmly against the still bleeding wound. He tried not thinking about how easy it had been to lay him on the floor, or how fast the blood was spreading into the towel, or how this was the blood of one of his best friends that was covering his hands. Ig, please, I don't want to lose anyone else, Moko begged, listening to the sounds of the bedroom door open and rushed footsteps. In here! The EMTs were in and took over faster than he could imagine. Mo scrambled back, letting them do their jobs, and in a blink the room was empty as they rushed him out. He could feel the phone vibrate in his pocket again. Moko reached for it, pausing, seeing the blood on his hands. Now he looked around the room. It was everywhere. There was blood in the sink, drips on the counter, a puddle on the floor, and the shirt was still there too. It was all he could smell. His stomach lurched, and he lunged for the toilet, emptying his life into the bowl. Moko taking shaking breaths, trying so hard not to break down. He couldn't do this now. Later, but not now. Ig needed him now. Wiping his mouth and eyes, he stood looking around the room, his gaze landing on the piece of glass still on the counter. Reaching over, he grabbed it, thinking of the stitches on Ash's fingers. Carefully, he slid it into his pocket. He turned the sink on, rinsing his hands, watching as they shook from beneath the jet of water. Clouds of red swirled down the drain, and as Mo watched them, feeling numbness creeping in, replacing the panic from earlier. A hand settled on his shoulder, and turning, he spotted the butler. We'll clean this, he said, motioning to the bathroom. Who knows? No one yet. Tell Hudson. Tell him Marceline's sick too, Moko said. Tell Hudson to call Ember if he can, he said, drying his hands on the towel offered to him. Pulling out the phone, he found 3 missed calls, one from Kate and the last 2 from Marshall. Sending a text to Kate, he called Marshall as he walked to his car. Mo, what's going on? Your text said Ig versus Ash with volcano and skull emojis. Dude, they finally had it out. Like ambulances called had it out. Ash has over 40 stitches, a fractured jaw and eye area, a concussion, and a few other things. Damn it, what about Ignitus? Marsh, I don't know if it was Ash or an accident, Moko said, his voice shaking. Ig ended up with this huge chunk of glass jammed in his side, and the damn idiot pulled it out. He's lost so much blood. I need Ember's number because he's not okay. Actually, could you call her? She may not answer a number she doesn't know. He's being brought to Mount Auburn. When are you going to get here? I'll give her a call. I'm at the cabin with Fiona and Ollie. It's gonna take a few hours, but I'm coming. I gotta ask, though, what do you mean when you say you're not sure if it was Ash or an accident? Hearing this, Moko swallowed as he reached back into his pocket, pulling out the piece of glass. Earlier tonight, Ash called me for a ride home from the hospital. He asked me for a cigarette, and I gave him my lighter. He had stitches on his palm and index finger, he said, wrapping his hand around the glass, watching where it dug into his skin. If he held this piece of glass tight enough, I'd need stitches around where Ash has them, he said, listening to the silence on the other end of the line. Marshall, he knew, understood what he was saying, even if he didn't say it. I'm going to call Ember. You get to the hospital, Marshall said, letting him go. Marceline, sweetheart, you need to get up, Hudson said, gently shaking Marceline's shoulder. Daddy, not now. I don't feel good. Marceline said, sounding utterly miserable, burying her face into the blanket. Marcy, get up. We have to go to the hospital. Hearing this, Marcy opened her eyes, looking at her father in confusion, as he brought his hand to her cheek and forehead. You're very warm. Have you had any medicine? He asked, watching Marceline nod. Iggy gave me some. Blinking, she looked around, taking in her surroundings, before her gaze stopped at Hambo clutched in her arms. We'll need to give you some more, Hudson said, continuing on with his thoughts. Dad, where's Iggy? He brought Hambo back, so he should be here, she said, squeezing Hambo tightly. Marceline didn't like the look on her father's face. Why am I on the couch? Honey, something happened. Ignitus is at the hospital. Come, we'll go see him, Hudson said, motioning for her to stand. He was tugging Marceline towards the door as she processed what he told her. Wait, he's in the hospital? Daddy, he came home, Marceline said, holding up Hambo as proof, pausing when she noticed his leg was sewn on backwards. I guess he's not the best sewer. They were in the car faster than Marceline realized. She felt so confused, and her head ached. Reaching for her phone, she dialed Ignitus's number, listening as it rang through to voicemail. They arrived at the hospital, Hudson taking complete charge as he asked all the questions, leading the way to where they were to wait. Entering the room, she immediately spotted Moko and Kate sitting in the corner already. The moment she entered the room, Mo looked up to face her. Marceline didn't like the look on his face either. What happened? Marcy asked, standing in front of him. I don't know how it happened. The nurse just left. They're in surgery now. He's getting infusions of plasma and blood. It got a big piece of Ig got a big piece of glass in his side. He pulled it out himself, and he bled a lot, and I... Mo paused, swallowing as he looked away from Marceline. I called to ask him about something, and I asked if he was okay. He said he wasn't because he couldn't stop the bleeding. I tried to stop it. I really, really did, he said, now looking from his hands to Marceline's devastated face. Reaching out, she hugged him, feeling as he squeezed her back tightly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't be. You did what you could to help him, and I can't thank you enough, she said, pulling back. Marceline watched as her dad stepped forward, pulling him into a hug as well. You did the best you could, son. That's all anyone could ask for in this situation, Hudson said, squeezing him tightly. Marceline never expected that Moko would burst into tears the way he had when her father had done that. Sugar, I'm sorry, I haven't heard that in years, Mo said, quickly releasing him. I know this is awkward. I'm the last piece of your mom left in this world. It would be unusual if you didn't get emotional from time to time. The doctors did say that could happen for me, but regardless, it's going to be okay, Hudson said, clasping his shoulder. Marshall. The ride to the hospital was quiet as he focused on the road. His mind was racing, and he knew Fiona's was too. Marsh, what happened? She asked, not for the first time, into the silence of the car. Marsh, I don't know if it was Ash or an accident. I don't know yet, but I'm gonna find out. Finn and Ember. Ember held it together after getting the phone call from Marshall. Ember had even kept it together after the nurse had come with the update. He was not stable. He had a penetrating abdominal injury, which had reached his liver. He bled internally and had lost nearly 2 liters of blood. He had multiple transfusions of both plasma and blood. Ember swallowed, accepting all of this information as she squeezed Finn's hand tightly. The nurse left the room, pausing just outside the door. Being caught in a passing conversation, Finn couldn't help but overhear. Coming back from break? No, updating the family of the patient in the OR, she said, her voice fading as she headed back. Finn knew if he'd heard her, then Ember had. Her eyes were open for any source of information about her brother. Her eyes were glued to the screen on the wall, waiting for his status to change from in surgery to in recovery. To Finn's shock, and to the surprise of the rest of the room, Ember burst into tears. Something's wrong, Finn, something's wrong. I can feel it, she said, wringing her hands. Let's take a walk, Em. We'll go get some water, Finn said softly, trying to help her from her seat. Finn figured a walk would at least calm her some. Ember, however, wasn't having it. I'm not leaving this room, she said scathingly as she stood, walking over and sitting next to Marcy, who took her hand. He's gonna be okay, Marceline said, squeezing Ember's hand, watching as she shook her head, on the verge of hyperventilating as she rocked herself in the chair. Something's so wrong, Marcy. I don't like this, Ember whispered, unable to stop trembling. She wished she could explain this feeling she had, this overwhelming, foreboding feeling. She felt like everything was crumbling down around her. A soft dinging began playing over the PA system. Code Blue OR3, Code Blue OR3, Code Blue OR3. Please, please. Finn stared, feeling a chill of surprise. Ember was praying. Now Finn swallowed at the sudden realization that as terrifying as Ignitus could be, he was still human. He wasn't immortal. Finn had been so focused on Ember, he hadn't noticed Marcy's sharp intake of breath. Ember, however, had, and the look on her face when she looked up had made his heart drop. Turning, he saw the nurse was back in the room. Ember was up and in front of the woman faster than any of them could move, her eyes streaming. What does he need? Whatever my brother needs, just take it from me. We're twins. We're the same. Take what you need from me. Please just fix him, Ember said desperately as Finn pulled her back. No, she said, pushing Finn away from her, turning back to the nurse. Please, I don't care what it is, what it costs, she begged. Take my blood, take my liver, take all of it. That's my brother. I need him. I can't do this without Iggy. I can't. Ember freaked out. There was nothing as cataclysmic as an Ember freak out. Compared to this, how she'd acted at the car accident had been tame. She was completely unglued, and Ember knew it. She didn't care. They needed to fix her brother. Ignitus needed to walk out of this hospital with her. Any other option was absolutely unacceptable. Ember had never lived on in this world without him, and she didn't want to start now. He promised her she'd never have to. Other nurses were drawn towards the commotion, and after a brief conversation with them, one that Finn knew was going to land him in the doghouse, they agreed that a tranquilizer would help. She was crying so hard she couldn't catch her breath. Ember didn't even remember how she'd gotten to the floor. Finn was holding her as tightly as he could. The new nurse poking her arm with a needle was an unnoticed pain. He promised me! He promised! She sobbed, watching the nurse talking with Marceline and her dad. Ember's world became a slow, sluggish blur. Her breaths got slower and deeper, and as Finn gazed sadly at her, she glared back, giving him a look of utter betrayal before everything went dark. Oh, my, Iggy, what are you doing here? I didn't think I'd see you so soon, Nana said, smiling as she put her tea down on the table. Standing and opening her arms, she hugged Ignitus tightly. How did you get here? Hitchhiked. Papa's not here, and I didn't want you to be alone, he said with a grin, feeling her hands on his cheeks. Iggy, you know you shouldn't do that. It's dangerous. Not to mention that I'm not your responsibility, she said sternly. Besides, you know Papa's with me in my heart. And I'm here in person, he said brightly as she smiled back. Did you miss me? I did. I missed you so very much, Iggy. How about we make some cookies? She asked, walking into the kitchen. Nana, can I stay here with you? At this question, she paused, turning to him. Please, I'm tired. Hearing this, she pulled him into another hug, her head rubbing the back of his head soothingly. Her hand rubbing the back of his head soothingly. Of course you can, my love, but just for a little bit. Today you have to go home. Ah, but why? The look on his face made her heart ache. Oh, how she hated disappointing him. Iggy, the people at home you'd leave behind would miss you so much. I know you love me, but is this really what you want? To leave your parents? Ignitus, though, didn't look fazed. They really don't like me, he said with a shrug. What about Ember? She's got her people, her own friends. Plus she's away on the abroad program. She won't miss me, he said, shaking his head. True, but what happens when she comes home? Would you really want to break your promise and leave Ember by herself there? Now he looked down, pouting. Nana had a point. No. What about your friends? She asked with her hands on her hips. They can visit, Ignitus said as if it were the most obvious answer in the world, though from the look on Nana's face, he knew it would be anything but. How often do you think your friends will take a 200-mile round trip, sweetie? I hate to burst your bubble, Iggy, but if you stayed here with me, you'd probably not see your friends again, she said, resting her hand on his cheek. I don't think you'd enjoy that very much. Again, his look of disappointment was almost too much to bear. Leaning forward, she kissed his forehead again. Come, help me make these cookies, and we'll spend some time together. It didn't take long for the smell of the cookies to fill the house. Ignitus lay on the couch with his head in Nana's lap as she hummed, her fingers going through his hair. I know you're holding back how you're feeling. It's okay to be sad, even for a little while. It gives you a chance to catch your breath. It's okay to be sad about Papa, Iggy. It's okay to be sad about Ember going off for school, too. I can see it in your eyes. You've been distant. I'll admit that. I know I haven't been myself. I just feel so numb. I'm doing everything I can to try and fix it, but I feel like I'm messing everything up. I messed it all up, Nana. I wish some days I could go back before life changed. It happened so fast, he said, sniffling, closing his eyes, feeling as she pet the top of his head. That time is gone, Iggy, and you know that. She gently chided, smiling down at him. I miss spending time with you, Nana. I know you do, sweetheart. I'll talk to your father about getting you out here more. I'll tell him I need help with yard work. Maybe I can convince him to help you get your license. You can have Papa's truck even. It runs just fine, she said now with a sad smile. I know you miss the life we had before, but as we grow, things change. Nothing ever stays the same. But you can love and miss what you had. You can love what you have, and you can make the best of what's left. Sometimes the things we don't even have yet are the very best things of our lives, Nana said, brushing his hair from his eyes. And I know it's not the same. Having new, happy memories when nothing is the same can make you feel so conflicted. I understand that all too well, Ignitus. It's not a betrayal to Ember or Papa for you to be happy. Ember will, Ember will come back, and Papa loves you infinitely and wants you to be happy, she said, wiping his cheeks dry, gently pinching his cheek. It doesn't matter how old you get, I'll always want to squish those cheeks of yours, Nana said, making a kissy face as Ignitus laughed. Oh my God, Nana. What girl is going to be lucky enough to end up with those squishy cheeks of yours, I wonder, she said, smiling, squishing his cheek again. Nana, you already know you're my best girl, he said, watching her smile. Always, my Iggy. I swear you're just growing up before my eyes, Nana said, rubbing his cheek again. You introduced me to a sweetheart, and I know you said you were just friends, she said, giving him a knowing look. But I liked her, Iggy. It's a Nana thing. She's meant for you. I know she's meant for you. What's her name again? Marceline, Ignitus said softly, watching as Nana beamed at him. Look at you with that smile. That's the look I knew I'd see, she said, her hand resting so lovingly on his head. He never wanted this to end. Now, as she looked towards the window, Ignitus watched as a golden owl flew by. Aw, it looks like it's time for you to head home, Iggy, Nana said as they stood by the door. It was funny. Ignitus didn't remember moving. Nana, I don't want to leave. I don't know when I'm going to be able to come back and see you, he said as she enveloped him into a hug. Oh, I love you, my Iggy. I love you so much more than I can express, and I want nothing more than for you to stay with me. But it's time to go now. I'll always be here when you're truly ready to come home, she said as he squeezed her tightly. I love you, Nana, he said, pulling back. She continued to smile at him, and reaching out, she pinched his cheek. Squish, she said, making him smile. Again, she reached towards him. Nana's hand rested on his side, and immediately Ignitus cried out, feeling a crippling pain that brought him to his knees. He looked up at her in hurt confusion, seeing tears in her eyes. When all you see in front of you are the memories that make you the happiest, you don't want to lose a thing, Nana said, lifting his chin to look at her. That's why this is so hard. Leaning forward, she kissed the top of his head, and again he felt an overwhelming bloom of pain. Her lips now were against his forehead, and he was falling out the door backwards and down into the blackness below. The golden owl from earlier swooped past him, growing astronomically in size as it did so. Its beak opened, and as Ignitus dropped into its mouth, he felt his body jerk as it snapped shut, swallowing him whole. They walked through. Oh, Marshall. They walked through the hospital towards the waiting room, and grabbing his hand, Fiona leaned her head on Marshall's shoulder. It feels weird, me not being the one in the hospital, Marshall said quietly, and hearing this, Fiona couldn't help but smile. It's a nice change, you not being the one in the hospital. I'm not happy about why we're here, but I'm happy that it's not you for once. As they stepped into the elevator, the doors closing, Marshall wrapped his arms around Fiona, holding her tightly. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to leave. Oh, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to leave for a few if he's in recovery. There's something I need to figure out, he said, giving her a squeeze before allowing Fiona to turn in his arms. That's no problem. You know I'll keep you updated, she said, Placing her hands on his cheeks, Fiona brought Marshall's forehead down to hers. If whatever you have to do has to happen now, then it has to be important. If it's out of surgery, it will be important enough. Fiona continued to study Marshall's face. What do you know that you're not telling me? It happened during the fight with Ash. If he's okay and stable, I'm going to find Ash and figure out what the hell happened. Do you think he did it, Marshall? I don't want to believe that he did, but at the same time, I have to be honest with myself and be realistic. They've been going back and forth like dogs ever since we set Ash up with Marcy. At this point, I don't know if they're even friends anymore, but I know now they can barely stand each other. I really wish we never did it, Marsh. Marcy told me she liked somebody else, and I guilted her into it. This is our fault. It's not your fault. All we can do is try and make up for our mistakes, he said as the elevator door closed. The walk down the hall was quiet, and entering the waiting room, they spotted everyone. Moko and Kate sat in the corner of the small room. His eyes were closed and his head on her shoulder, Kate's fingers running through his hair, talking to him quietly. Finn sat on the couch in the back of the room. Ember lay on the rest of the couch, her head in his lap. Hudson was the closest to them and stood when they entered. What's the news? Marshall asked. Marceline just now was allowed back to see him, Hudson said quietly. He's in stable condition, had a few transfusions. It was touch and go for a little bit, and he gave us a hell of a scare. Now he turned towards the back of the room. Ember had to be sedated. Finn made the right call. That poor girl broke my heart, he said softly, shaking his head. Hudson, what happened? Fiona asked. The look he gave her filled her with dread. She watched as he searched for his words until finally he spoke. What happened isn't as important as the fact that he's alive and should be okay, Hudson said warmly with a smile. It was so unlike him. Don't sugarcoat it, Moko said, his voice thick. They said he was unresponsive over 3 minutes, Marsh. That's why Ember freaked out. She knew something was wrong before any one of us did, he said, pushing himself to his feet. Fiona squeezing his shoulder as he passed by, before walking over to sit with her brother. Nodding towards the door, Marshall walked from the room, Mo following behind them. We gonna go talk to Ash? He asked, falling into step with Marshall as they walked down the hallway. Nah, I'm gonna go talk to Ash. Do you have it? Marshall watched as Moko reached into his pocket, pulling out the piece of glass, handing it to him. It was larger than Marshall had imagined it being. Are we at the cabin? Mo asked as they walked down the hall. Yeah, I don't want her here. She's with Billy and Ellen. Hearing this, Moko nodded. All right, I don't care whatever your plan was. Change it because I'm coming, Mo said, crossing his arms, looking stubbornly at Marshall, who stared at him. Finally, he grinned. You know, all this bullshit and drama going on had me freaked out. You were right, but damn, with everything crazy happening, you're really stepping up and coming into your own. I'm proud of you. The look of surprise on Moko's face to Marshall was almost comical. He'd been more than surprised. This obviously wasn't what he'd expected him to say. Marshall was proud of him. Let's go, Marshall said as he walked down the hall, Moko falling into step beside him. So, what do you think happened? Marshall asked as they pulled down Ash's Street. Honestly, I don't have enough info to be certain, but it doesn't look like it's in Ash's favor. Ig said that Ash had been stalking Marceline, Mo said as they pulled up, watching as Marshall turned to look at him. He said that when he went to that apartment that night, Ash was inside messing with her stuff and he lost it. I asked Ig if he thought Ash did it. With how they've been fighting, in a situation crazy enough between them, with the fact that he had those stitches on his hand, I think it's very possible, Moko said in the darkness of the car. Ignitus said he doesn't know if it was Ash, and that's the only thing saving him right now. I just hope I'm wrong. What did Ash say happened? A severe lapse of judgment, Mo said, air quoting. He wasn't talkative, and I didn't want to push him, Moko said as he opened the car door. Mo, I'm warning you now, Marshall said, now turning to Moko. If Ash had anything to do with this, I'm going to hurt him in every way Ig wouldn't. Mo watched as he walked across the street and was quick to follow. The spare key, as usual, was under the planter on the porch, and using that, they let themselves in. The house was quiet, the soft glow and murmur of the television going in the back room. Marshall knew from experience that that was the master bedroom where Ash's mom slept. Motioning for Moko to stay by Ash's door, Marshall quietly walked down the hall, pulling her door shut before returning. Cracking the door to Ash's room, Mo peeked his head in, looking around. He spotted him on the bed, laying on his stomach, facing away from them. Nodding to each other, they entered the room, shutting the door tightly behind them. Moko had decided to follow Marshall's lead. He didn't know the plan Marshall had made, so he was going to hang back and observe. The second Ash caused trouble, he'd jump right in. Marshall walked over to the bed, sitting on the edge of it. Moko watched as Marshall shook Ash's shoulder, softly calling his name. To his shock, he saw the moonlight glinting off the glass shard in Marshall's other hand. Ash groaned, turning his head, blinking blearily at them, looking more than confused to see Marshall. Marshall, what are you doing here? He asked sleepily. He tried pushing himself up, but by the weight Marshall added to the hand on his shoulder, Ash knew that for whatever reason, he should not move. I heard you and Ig got into it tonight, Marshall said quietly, Ash looking more than confused now, and also embarrassed. Marsh, I don't want to talk. Marshall placed the glass shard on the bed next to Ash's face, and Mo watched as his eyes grew huge. What the hell is that? He asked in a panicked voice. See, and here I was hoping you could tell me what happened between you and Ignitus. But now I have to figure it out on my own. Let me see your hand. Mo could see, was more than nervous, and as he raised his trembling hand, Marshall grabbed it, examining it. The other one, he said, grabbing Ash's other hand as he reached for the glass. I'll tell you what happened, Marshall. Just shut up, Marshall hissed, pressing the glass against his hand. Mo listened as Ash gasped, squeezing his eyes shut. Moko expected to see blood come rushing from his hand, though moments passed and nothing happened. Mo could see Marshall pressing the glass into his hand to see if it matched the stitches. Finally, he pulled back, seemingly satisfied, giving him a look. Tell me, what the hell were you doing in Ignitus's and Moise's place? I hoped that if I could get Hambo, I could convince her to sit down and talk with me for a little bit. Then I figured that even then she still might not listen to what I had to say, so I got upset and ripped his leg off. That was when Ignitus came home. What happened next? Marshall's voice was soft, but the angry viciousness in his tone spoke volumes. He locked the door and tackled me into the wall. We knocked something framed off of it because that's how I ended up getting the stitches on my hand and arm. Hearing this, Mo leaned forward. This was new information. You got stitches in your arm, too? Marshall asked, watching as Ash pulled the sleeve of his shirt up, revealing a curved path of stitches up his forearm. Yes, not trying to get stabbed, but what the hell, Marshall? Ash asked in a small voice. What happened after that? He asked, the viciousness gone, but his voice still firm. We beat the crap out of each other, is what I'd like to say happened. He tackled me, we hit the wall, he hit me repeatedly, and I tried blocking it. Instead of that happening, I fell and took him with me. We rolled on the ground, taking a bunch of crap shots at each other. I had an opening, so I clocked him, trying to get him off me. I split his eyebrow, and his head hit the table. I remember that specifically because I hit him, and I heard the thunk sound, and I laughed because I'm sorry, it was funny. Well, he didn't appreciate that because he knocked me the hell out. 3 to the head, and it was lights out. Okay, Marshall said slowly. At what point did you cut your arm? Probably when we were rolling. The glass is how I got most of these stitches anyway. I think I kicked the frame when we fell because I remember the floor was covered in it. Okay, how'd you cut your fingers? Probably when I was backing away. Like I said, there was glass everywhere. Are you gonna give Ig the third degree too? Because if not, this isn't fair, Ash said as Mo suddenly spoke up, startling him. I know what I think right now. What do you think, Marshall? He asked, Ash staring in shock. Dude, how the hell long have you been there and what's going on? Mo came with me. Ig's in the hospital. Marshall said quietly, listening to Ash's annoyed sigh. Well, whoop-de-frickin'-do, Marsh. He put me in the hospital, too. I got an ambulance right there, he said, glowering at him. He's in the ICU, Mo said, watching as Ash looked at him, now more than confused. What? What the hell happened to him? What the hell happened to him? Looks like you weren't the only person cut by glass, Marshall said quietly. Ig had to have emergency surgery after we found a chunk of glass in his side. He lost a lot of blood and has damaged internal organs, Moko said, watching the concern grow on his face. That's not good, Ash said softly. Not at all, he agreed. What hospital? Mount Auburn. He's in recovery right now, so I'd suggest waiting until Marceline leaves if you're going to pay him a visit, Marshall said, watching as Ash nodded. Is he going to be okay? It was really touch and go, but he's stable and moved into recovery less than an hour ago. Marshall said, now pocketing the glass. Ash's eyes were on him the whole time as realization suddenly clicked into place. Wait, did you guys think I stabbed him? Ash asked incredulously. With how you guys act towards each other now, can you really blame us? Marshall asked. Yes, Ash snapped, shoving Marshall off the bed now as he sat up to face them looking pissed. I really can blame you guys. You guys straight up assume the worst about me all the time. I'm tired of it. Sure, I can't stand his aggravating ass half the time, and the other half he can't stand mine, but I don't want Ignitus dead, he said, glaring at them both. Ash, ever since the whole Marceline thing you've been different, and not a good different. From what I've been told, you're stalking Marcy. There's been quite a few issues with us warning you about keeping yourself in check, and not putting your hands on women, Marshall said, now crossing his arms. This when Mark was surprised. This was the first he'd heard of this. Yeah, and I've been the therapist trying to work on it, and I'm in anger management. I haven't done anything intentionally wrong like that since I started therapy with the new therapist. As for Marceline, I've been trying to apologize, and granted, the last two times I messed up because. Now he broke off, looking back and forth from Marshall to Milkrow. They still didn't know. Ignitus hasn't said a single thing to either of you, has he? Ash asked, still looking back and forth between Marshall and Milkrow. About Marceline leaving me. That whole situation? Marceline's afraid of me because the last argument we got into, the one that caused her to leave, he said, now looking away from them, hanging his head. It ended with me slapping her. Faster than he could blink, Mo was punching his arm. What the hell is wrong with you? He snapped, Marshall standing back, letting it happen. Cut it the hell out. I already said I haven't done anything since. What the hell more do you want from me? Ash snipped back, swatting at Mo, who backed off. I don't know. You just deserved it, Moko said, crossing his arms, looking more than annoyed with him. Are you going to leave Marceline alone, or is this going to be an ongoing problem, Ash? Marshall asked as Ash stood. I want to talk with her. Ignitus can be in the room for all I care. There are just things I want to get off my chest, but I genuinely mean that I'll leave her alone. Cool, let's go, Marshall said, now opening the door to Ash's bedroom. Where? To the hospital. You're going to say this in front of every single person, and we're all going to hold you to your word for the rest of your life. Ignitus. Everything had been going in and out of focus. The sound of the monitors beeping, fading in and out. The sound of footsteps passing by. It smelled like a hospital. It sounded like a hospital. It would probably look like a hospital if he could open his damn eyes. He couldn't. They were too heavy. Conversations were fading in and out, though the most familiar voices had been Ember's and Marceline's. One presence he'd felt that hadn't left at all since taking his hand had been so soothing. She felt like steady peace, her thumb moving slowly on his hand. That, he knew, had to be Marceline. The other felt like a hurricane of emotions the moment she arrived. He knew that hurricane. He'd lived in the eye of it his whole life. Emma. He wanted to do something, to say something, anything. Why was existing so exhausting? This was bullshit. Their whispered conversations had been fading in and out the entire time. Marceline's hand was holding his now, her hand resting on his arm. She was still so very warm. Ember held his other hand in both of hers as she spoke to him. Iggy, please, show me you're okay, she whispered, squeezing his hand with the both of hers. Squish! He wanted so badly to squeeze her hand back. All he managed to do was make his finger twitch. This, though, seemed to be enough as she gasped softly. Do it again, Ember said, her voice hushed, squeezing his hand again. Come on, Squish, if that was you, do it again. She waited expectantly, holding his hand with bated breath. It was easier this time to focus on his hand. It was almost as if he'd simply forgotten how it felt to move and just had to remember. Ignitus thought about his fingers, about the action of squeezing her hand, and felt as his fingers twitched, trying to obey him. Slowly, so tortuously slow, his fingers moved, tightening on Ember's hand as she gasped. You know it's me, right? Ember asked, feeling as he squeezed her hand again. We were all worried about you, Iggy. You had us all really scared. I was scared. I was so scared. I thought you were going to leave me, Ember said, her voice breaking. I was so scared because I'm not ready to live in a world without you here with me. I never will be, and I don't ever want to, Ember said, squeezing his hand tightly as she sniffed, wiping her eyes. Ignitus squeezed her hand back as hard as he could. "You must be so tired," Ember said softly, bringing her hand to his cheek. He squeezed her hand again, just barely. She was right. He was exhausted. "Go to sleep. We're all here for you. Every one of us," Ember said softly, kissing his forehead. And he did. He was so tired. 8 hours later, sitting upright, Ignitus looked around the room. Marceline stood next to him, holding his hand tightly, and Ember was on the other side. Everyone was jam-packed in his room, and Ash stood at the foot of the bed. "I treated you poorly. I used you to make myself feel better, both physically and emotionally. The way I treated you was abusive, even if that was not my intention. For that, I'm sorry," Ash said. Fiona opened her mouth to say something, but Marshall placed his hand on her shoulder and shook his head. Ignitus nodded towards him in thanks, as Ash continued speaking. "I tried to control you, I manipulated you, I intimidated you, and worst of all, I hit you." "You did what?" Hudson fumed. "Daddy, later," Marceline said, her voice firm as she looked at her father. Hudson crossed his arms, looking furious, but relented. "Ash, go on," she said, watching as he continued on, staying and owning every single thing he'd done to her. "I'm sorry my jealousy got the best of me, and I genuinely, truly apologize for using that as an excuse to treat you poorly, to hurt you. I can make up all the excuses I want for why I acted the way I acted, but it won't change the fact that I hurt you. I hurt you in ways I will probably never understand. I promise I'll do whatever I have to do to make it right," he said in earnest. "I'll leave you be now. I just wanted to apologize and make things right as best as I could. Marshall was right. The best way for me to do this was in front of everyone. This way I can hold myself accountable for my word, and everyone else can hold me accountable too." Hearing this, Marceline nodded, noticing that for the most part the majority of the room was looking at her. "I accept your apology, Ash. I don't forgive you, but I accept it," Marceline said, feeling as Ignitus squeezed her hand in reassurance. Now Ash turned to face Ignitus. "I'm sorry. I haven't been a good friend to you. I can accept that, but the street goes both ways, too. I could have been less of an ass. Considering this issue between us almost killed me, can we consider this shit between us done?" "It's deader than a doornail," Ash said as a knock came from the door. Leaning over, Marshall opened it, and a nurse walked in with a bouquet of flowers and a vase with a card. "Hi, Mr. Flint. These are for you," the woman said brightly, placing the flowers on the table. As she made her way to the door, Ignitus plucked the card from the floral arrangement, his face darkening as he skimmed it. Oh no. "I think I know who sent it." "Hey, come back." Turning, the nurse returned, looking concerned. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, I'd just rather the nurse's station enjoy these flowers. You guys work hard and should be appreciated," he said, watching as her face brightened. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I'd be insulted if you didn't," he said with a smile as she took them back. Walking from the room. The moment the door closed behind her, he tore the card in half over and over again, until it was nothing more than a small flurry of pieces in his lap. "So, screw them, right?" Ash said, stabbing at an attempt of humor. "Guys, can you all clear out for a minute? I want to talk to Emma," he said, looking at Ember, who looked confused. Everyone else, doing as asked, walked from the room. "Iggy, what's wrong?" "Please," he said, watching as she frowned. "Please don't tell our parents anything about me." She looked more than surprised. "Iggy, you died," Ember said in a choked voice. "They deserve to know that much, even if they suck," she said, though her frustration turned to sadness. "If Ash can be here, then they can know." "Ash didn't try to kill me," he said softly. Click. The memory of his father made him flinch. He still hadn't told Ember about that. "I know, and I'm happy that's resolved, but hey, are you okay?" she asked, looking him over. The look on his face concerned her more than she'd admit. "Ig?" Now he looked at her. "I'm fine, just sore," he lied. "But please, black out silence when it comes to me. Please?" he asked, squeezing her hand. "They exist, they're not dead to me, but if I'm not dead, I don't want them knowing," Ignitus said, his voice pleading, taking Ember completely off guard. "Okay," she said softly, holding his hand. "Okay. Enjoy the chapter." Oh, alright. So, essentially, that was, um, I, I thought the card was from Lich, but apparently it's from his parents. I'll be right back with another chapter, and see you in a minute. Once again, my short break has turned into a much longer break, but I'm back, and I'm going to read the next chapter. Chapter 102, Healing. More than a month had passed since Ash and Ignitus' fight, and a lot had returned to normal. Fiona and Marshall had moved back into the house, and after a week of no trouble, they brought Arya and Cake home as well. Fiona had been more than determined to find Ashley that first week back, and was bummed to say that she'd failed. Ashley was as elusive as a cockroach, sensing its impending doom, and Fiona couldn't wait to crush her. Deciding that grocery shopping would be a good idea, she gave Ignitus a call, as Marshall requested she do should she need to go anywhere alone, and made plans to grab him so they could go to the grocery store. Fiona had been hesitant to call him. After his surgery, Ignitus had been in an immense amount of pain, and that had given him an attitude and a half. Especially because he refused any and all painkillers they offered him. He didn't want to fall off the wagon, and for that Fiona nor anyone else could fault him. He did, however, always brighten up when he saw Arya. The trip to the store had been uneventful, and as they perused the aisles, Ignitus spoke. So you're really fine with Marshall meeting Lich all by himself now? All by himself right now? He asked, leaning against the grocery cart, watching as Fiona sighed. Arya, oblivious to the conversation and strapped to her mother's chest, kicked her legs happily. She reached for a brightly colored toy hanging in the aisle, and Fiona stepped back, gently grabbing her hand. No, thank you, she said quietly, looking at her daughter who beamed at her. No, she said to Ignitus, now reaching for the large cans of stewed tomatoes, already reaching for them as she put them into the cart. Of course I'm not fine. It worries me. Lich is a psycho freak of nature, and Marshall's there by himself. Well, the plus side is we can't go on tour for as long as Ash and I are on light duty, so 6 weeks down and 4 to go, he said. Fiona, unable to stop it, smiled. I hate that made me feel better, she said, giving him a look, and watching as Ignitus shrugged in return. What can I say, girlie? I live to please, he said, grinning as they continued through the aisles. Fiona stopped every now and then to grab something else on the list as he followed behind her. Marshall wasn't kidding about the buddy system with the girls. If it weren't for the fact that Marceline was working, she'd have been with them too. Fiona turned towards him, opening her mouth to speak, but paused, spotting something at the end of the aisle. You okay? Ignitus asked, looking behind him to see what had caused this change in mood. Yep, I have to cash a check, Fiona said, pulling her hair back and tying it up. You can't carry more than 20 pounds right now, right? Fiona said, lifting Arya from the carrier on her chest and settling her into the child seat before shouldering off the carrier and tossing it into the cart. Buckling her in, Fiona gave Arya a quick kiss before walking down and out of the aisle, leaving Ignitus in a state of confusion. Ollie Bear, I think your mom's up to something, Ignitus said quietly, turning the cart around, heading in the direction Fiona went off to. He paused, though, as a vaguely familiar old woman stood in the aisle staring at him. Excuse me, Miss Nana, he said, watching her face brighten. I knew I recognized you, I knew it, she said happily, Ignitus more than confused. You were the sweet young man who walked me home and carried my groceries during that snowstorm, she said, watching as his face lit up in recognition. Holy cow, you're that Miss Nana. Hi, he said brightly, smiling back at her. He remembered her back from the senior year of high school. Look at you, all grown up. And you're a father now. Congratulations, sweetheart, she said, tucking a card into his hand. I'll bake you an apple pie as an appropriate thank you. Oh, she's not. The sound of a scream snatched their attention, and FP felt his heart drop. Girlie, what did you do? I'm so sorry. I have to go stop her mother, he said, glancing at the business card. Rain check on that pie, Mrs. Trunks, he said, hurrying past the old woman and heading in the direction of the fight, now obviously taking place in the grocery store. The moment Fiona had seen her, it was a wrap. Fiona rounded the corner, pulling out the earrings Marshall had given her, shoving them into her pocket. Ashley stopped just ahead, looking at the boxes of cereal on the end cap. Hey, Ashley, Fiona said, her voice bright and cheery, catching her attention. The second Ashley turned to look behind her, Fiona swung, slamming her fist into her jaw. Ashley hit the floor, and Fiona wasted zero time and began pummeling her. The other shoppers were panicking. Ashley's screams were almost deafening. Fiona could feel the burn against her skin as Ashley clawed at her. The more Ashley fought back, the angrier Fiona got for her having the audacity to do so. The burning ache in her fist only increased, but she refused to stop. Pure fury was winning out over every sensible thought she had. Girlie! Suddenly she was jerked back by her shoulder. Shrugging it away, Fiona lunged back towards Ashley, who was now scrambling back in a panic. A sharp pain in her ear made her yelp, freezing in place. Suddenly Fiona was being pulled back. Any resistance was met with that same sharp pain, as Fiona was dragged from the grocery store. Ow, 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 ow! She whined, Ignitus giving no purchase, as he continued storming down the aisle, keeping their faces down. Move it! He snapped, glowering at her. He pulled an ember, and Ignitus was pissed about it. Fiona's ear was pinched by his left hand, being held by his right arm, the baby happily patting his face. He dragged her from the store, Fiona stumbling every now and again as he ignored her yelps of pain. They came to a halt at the car, and Ignitus finally released his grip on her ear. You want to tell me what the hell, Fiona? You can fight whoever the hell you want when I'm not recovering from impaling myself, thanks, he snapped, still holding Ari, who was starting to fuss. I've been looking for her since I got back, Ig. She deserves everything I did to her, and then some, Fiona said, fuming as she rubbed her ear. Yeah, I realize that, but you have to give me advance notice of some kind, Fiona. Now get in the car, he said, buckling Arya into the car seat and shutting the door. I have groceries to... You should have thought of that before you went batshit crazy in the grocery store, he said, now stopping Fiona from leaving. Get in the car, Ignitus growled, glaring at her, watching as Fiona visibly shrunk. Opening the passenger's door, Ignitus watched as Fiona sat down in the car. Once she was in, he slammed the door shut behind her, leaning against the car, taking a breath. The sound of Arya's startled crying immediately sent an immediate pang of guilt through his heart. Looking up, he watched as two cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their lights flashing and sirens going, as he hurried to the driver's side. Shit. Keys, girlie! Keys, keys, keys! Fiona dug through her pockets, pulling them out, quickly handing them over. The car started quickly, and as they backed out, FP swore, looking towards the exit. Are they checking the cars? Fiona asked in a small voice, looking at Ignitus in pure horror. You physically assaulted someone in a public place in broad daylight in front of dozens of people on camera, he said, giving Fiona a stern look. They're totally going to be looking for you. Immediately, Fiona buried her face in her hands. Crap, I didn't think. No, you did not. Damn it, girlie, this is why I need advance notice, Ignitus said, rubbing his face. Hopefully they won't have many clear shots of our faces on camera, he said, shaking his head. Fiona now, though, climbed over the armrest and into the back seat. Arya was red-faced and utterly bawling. A car horn honked them, and immediately Ignitus pulled back into the space. Slamming his hands onto the wheel, he swore. Everything was getting so overwhelming, and Arya screaming wasn't helping. What's... We can't stay here forever, Egg, Fiona said softly, trying her best to hush Arya's cries. What's got her so upset? Aside from being startled, triple threat. No nap, hungry, and a wet bum, she said, now making quick work of the diaper. Reaching under her shirt for the clasp on her bra, Fiona gasped. Hey, give me a hoodie, Fiona said, putting Arya back in the car seat, earning a new set of frustrated cries. What? Dude, just give it, Fiona said, pulling on the shoulder. I have an idea that I think might work. Well, enlighten me, because I don't think you attacking a cop is a good idea. That's not what I'd be doing exactly. 5 minutes later. Marshall's gonna freaking kill me, Fiona said, the hoodie tied tightly over her beet red face, hiding her shame. I can't lie, though, your plan worked, Ignitus said with a shrug as they drove down the street. Now he turned to Fiona, smirking. Girlie, you so made that cop's day. If you weren't in recovery, I'd hit you so hard. Shut up. Hey, I'm just impressed at how you were abreast of the situation. Ignitus Pure Flint, I swear to God, Fiona said, a warning edge to her voice. Ignitus continued the drive in silence, and pulling into the driveway, he spotted Marshall's car. He parked and turned back to look at Fiona. You telling Marshall about this? Yeah, Fiona said in a resigned voice. Are you telling him, or am I? He asked as Fiona sighed. I don't care, she said softly, lifting the car seat from its base. Ignitus led the way, opening the door for her, allowing Fiona to enter first. Hey guys, I got your note. How was grocery shopping? Marshall watched as Fiona put the car seat down next to the couch. Ignitus was the first to respond. Oh, it was a tit, he said, the humor evident in his voice. Turning, Fiona punched Ignitus's arm as hard as she could before storming from the room. Seconds later, he was pelted upside the head with his hoodie. Okay, what I miss? Marshall asked as FP rubbed his arm ruefully. Oh, the usual. A little physical assault, a little nudity, escaping from the cops. I got an old lady's number. I'm gonna visit her place for apple pie. Wanna come? Wait, what? Apple pie, Marshall. It's an American classic. Where's your patriotism? You know what I mean. Yep. Oops. Hang on. I'm trying to fix shit. Apple pie, Marshall. It's an American classic. Where's your patriotism? You know what I mean. Marshall, you had to know after what Ashley did to you, Fiona was going to retaliate in some way, he said, watching as Marshall's eyes went wide. Yeah, I know. Ash called me the same night. Why didn't you tell me? He asked as Marshall looked away from him before. Yeah, I know about that. Ash called me the same night. Why didn't you tell me? He asked as Marshall looked away from him before finally speaking. What could I say without sounding dumb? He asked with a weak shrug. FP, though, wasn't having it. I don't know. My ex tried to rape me. I was sexually assaulted at Ash's house. Ashley tried having my babies while I slept. I have more if you want. He asked as Marshall crossed his arms. It's not that easy. I never said it was. It never is with her, but you could have told me. You know I'm the last person that will judge or look down on you, Marshall, Ignitus said, unclipping Arya from the car seat. Go talk to Girlie. We're gonna have to do some solid alibi work, he said seriously as Marshall nodded. Good to know. Turning, he walked from the living room, heading up the stairs. Marshall knocked once on the bedroom door before entering. Fiona lay across the bed, taking slow, deep breaths, Kate purring loudly beside her. Before he could say a word, Fiona beat him to it. I beat up Ashley, I whooped her good, but I wasn't smart about it at all, she said quietly, her face buried in the blankets. Do I want to know? He asked, sitting on the corner of the mattress, waiting for Fiona to continue. He knew she would. She just needed to do things in her own time. You need to know. They got everything on camera and witnesses, Fiona said, now meeting his eyes, looking thoroughly ashamed. Fee. They called the cops, and they had officers stationed at the exits of the parking lot, checking cars as they left. Geez, Fiona, he said, his voice hushed. Now, though, she looked away from him. Marshall, you're going to be really mad at me, she said in a small voice. Why? I was getting ready to feed Ollie, and the thought came to me that if the officers saw me feeding the baby, I could panic and freak out about wanting privacy, and they'd rush us along. That worked great in theory, but less so in practice, she said softly. What happened? It couldn't have gone as bad as she was acting. Nobody got arrested. Ollie was hungry and bit me mid-suck. I screamed and scared her. She cried, and the cops saw my whole boob until I accidentally squirted him with milk, Fiona said, her face burning with embarrassment. Hearing this, Marshall was unable to hold back his laughter, the loud sound startling Kate, who hopped off the bed, her tail flicking in annoyance. Oh my God, Fiona, that's amazing, he said, wiping his eyes. I'm sorry, I know this is serious, but that was funny. Laying on the bed, he rubbed Fiona's back. No, it's not. We'll figure everything out, Fee. Try not to worry. Hell, maybe I could even take Litch up on his offer of protection and have the cops drop it, he said with a laugh, though Fiona wasn't amused. Call him. What? If he can fix this, call him, Fiona said, looking away. I was so dumb, Marsh. All I could think about was what she did to you, and how upset you were about it, she said, now looking back to Marshall. I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I didn't think how this could affect me or Ollie. I didn't think about what I put Ig through either. I feel terrible. Is that what you really want me to do? We can always call Jake and see if his friend can lose Ashley's paperwork. We can also talk to Ash to see what he can do. Marsh, I'm sorry, but I don't trust Ash. Marcy doesn't trust Ash. I don't know how you do. Does FP? Because I don't think he does either. I know Mo doesn't. He acts like everything's fine in front of him, but he doesn't trust him. It's not that I trust Ash per se. I just know he's being true to his word, Marshall said, looking guilty. You're making the face, Fiona said, now giving him a look as she pushed herself up. What did you do? So you remember when Ash lost his phone a few weeks back? Yeah, it was the same week we got Ollie back from my parents. Well, he logged into the Track My Phone website to find it, and I kinda saw the password, he said, scratching the back of his head. You know, he's glued to his phone because of his mom. So, you've been tracking Ash? Basically, yeah. I haven't told anyone, because the more people know, the bigger the chance that the secret will slip, Marshall said, pulling his phone out and handing it to Fiona. So, this is an active map? She asked, she asked curiously. Yeah, it updates every few minutes, Marshall said as the phone pinged and the dot moved. See, looks like he's heading home from work. Give it 10 and check it again and you can see where he went. You don't want to stare and wait for it to update because that's just draining, he said, pushing himself up from the bed. Cracking the door open, Cake scooted from the room as he peeked out, checking on Egg and Ollie. Spotting a game of peekaboo taking place, he smirked, closing the door. Lying on the bed, he plucked the phone from Fiona's hand, placing it on the side table. There's a lot we can do in 10 minutes, he said with a suggestive smirk as Fiona gasped, unable to hide her smile. Flirty, silly. Marshall had been around so rarely lately, and it was nice to have him back. Gosh, FP's right downstairs. Yes, he is. He's also distracted by a very cute baby, Marshall said, making Fiona's breath catch as he began kissing up her neck. What if he hears us? Don't worry about that. You just focus on me and feeling good, he breathed, listening to her panting breaths. You're being such a tease, Marshall, Fiona said, trying not to give in. She wanted the moral high ground here, and she knew Marshall knew this. She was definitely losing this battle. Is it working, though? He asked, falling kisses down towards her chest, his hands now wandering along her body as her face heated up. Marshall was pushing every one of Fiona's buttons, and he knew it. Yes, she said, pouting, and the sight made him laugh. You don't have to look so happy about You don't have to look so happy about it, Marshall said, listening to her soft gasp, his hand sliding up her thigh. Do you want me to stop? He asked. The moment the words left his lips, Fiona's hand laced itself behind his neck, pulling him towards her. No, she breathed, closing the distance between them, bringing her lips to his. Marshall made his way down the stairs, spotting both Arya and Ignitus in the kitchen. Arya was sitting on the floor, clanging the pots and pans with a wooden spoon, having a ball of a time. So, you talked to Girlie? Ignitus asked the moment he entered. Yeah, we talked for a bit, but she's taking a nap. Geez, Marshall, you have a babysitter for a few minutes, and you sure take full advantage, don't you? Ignitus said, smirking as Marshall's face burned. It's not like that. Seeing Ig's eyebrow raise, Marshall sighed. You can freaking bite me. Dude, I get it. Do you think Marcy and I are getting together every night? We're not, and it sucks, he said with a sigh. Well, surgery and injuries do that to you, man. Nah, it was before that. To be honest, we never really got back into our groove. It's gonna sound terrible, but I think Ash broke her, Ignitus said, looking at his hands. All you can do is support her as best you can. I know that, but I can count the number of times we've slept together on one hand, and we've been married 6 months now, he said with another sigh. Is it that she's not in the mood? Maybe take her to dinner, Marshall suggested. I have to see when I can drink again. It'll probably be in the next few weeks or so, he said softly, hopping up on the counter to sit. Marshall watched as he glanced around before speaking again, quieter now. But for real, she's a lot more reserved and quiet now. She used to be completely wild in the bedroom. Now she's a shy little thing. Maybe it's something you can work on, Marshall said with a shrug. I mean, I know damn near all the buttons to push to get Fiona wound up. Maybe you have to figure that out with Marcy. You also have to remember being at your parents' house can kill your sex drive. What? He asked, now scoffing. Come on, who wants to run the risk of getting caught? Marshall said as if it were the most obvious thing on earth. He specifically could recall the few times he and Fiona had been caught by her family. Those were some of the most embarrassing moments of his life, hands down. The people who get turned on by getting caught, duh. Come on, Marshall, you should know about exhibitionism at this point, FP said, shaking his head. But I could be more romantic. I don't know. Maybe I'll do something special for her tonight. Just take your time, Marshall said. Marshall said, now backing out of the kitchen to look up the stairs. The bedroom door was still firmly shut. Sometimes when something triggers Fiona, she doesn't want me to touch her at all. It's hard because some days she's completely okay, and other days everything upsets her. The thing with Fee is that she loves physical touch. Physical touch makes her happy when she's sad, comforted when she's upset. She goes crazy for it. But there are some times when my touch isn't good for the state of mind she's in, he said, sounding sad as he shook his head. It's her, but sometimes I can't physically touch her, and I know it hurts her. It hurts me too, but it's not something I'd hold over her head. Fiona's got baggage she's picked up from being in my life, and it's my responsibility to help her with that baggage, Marshall said, watching as Ignitus nodded. She did have less baggage before Ash, Ig said slowly, and he basically gave her an entire delivery shipment worth of shit to figure out and unpack, Marshall said, watching as he looked away from him. I think I'm being an ass again. For what? Thinking like this, agreeing with that last thing you said, he said, now shrugging. I promised that I would accept her for all the good and bad, and a few months sounds booty and I'm here acting like a bitch, he said with a sigh. You know, you've known Marcy pre-Ash for a minute, Marshall said, now looking at FP. Maybe it's time to get to know the ins and outs of Marcy's post-Ash, he said, watching as Ig looked up, meeting his gaze. That's a really good idea, like starting completely over. Kinda, except you have a cheat sheet of her likes and dislikes. You just have to learn anything new. Don't assume something will be the exact same, like maybe the way you hold her makes her uncomfortable, or something you do without realizing it. Sometimes it's the smallest things. It could be anything, so treat her like you've never met her before and go from there. Yeah, do you know how we met? That kind of doesn't apply to us. He's he said, laughing as Marshall sighed in annoyance. You know what I mean. I do, and it's good advice. We just have to start slow and see how it goes, he said, hopping off the counter now. Because I'm happy, Marsh. I'm so damn happy with her. I don't want a single thing to ruin this, me especially. Crouching down and lifting Ori in a hug and blowing raspberries on her cheek, Ignitus placed her back with her pots and pans, turning to face Marshall. You made a lot of good points, and I've got to go prepare for tonight. I'm going to date my wife. He said, walking from the house after clapping Marshall on the shoulder. Okay, wasn't really expecting him to leave, but okay, Marshall said, lifting Ori as he collected the pots and pans from the ground. Placing her on her tummy in the playmat in the living room, Marshall sat down with her after pulling a book from the shelf. Today, Ori, we start on a little light reading. None of that ABC 1, 2, 3 stuff, Marshall said, opening the book. Chapter 1, in which a story is told, he said, looking at Ori, who crawled towards him as he began reading. Yes, there is a witch in the woods. There has always been a witch. Will you stop your fidgeting for once? My stars, I have never seen such a fidgety child. No, sweetheart, I have not seen her. No one has. Not for ages. We've taken steps so that we will never see her. What book is that? Marceline looked around her new office. Never in a million years did she imagine she'd be agreeing to this with her dad. They'd agreed to a 10-year takeover, or more specifically, her father had decided on it. During the next 10 years, he would be teaching her the ins and outs of the music empire he'd built from nothing. She'd learned everything from payroll to public speaking to human resources to public relations. She was either going to continue on the family name, as wildly successful as her father had, or she completely bomb. Only time would tell. This is crazy. The moment she had the thought, the phone on her desk began ringing. Hunton Aberdeen's office. Honey, I told you, this is your personal line. Marceline Aberdeen's office, VP of Nidosphere Records. Say it, her dad said on the other line. Marceline did as she was told. Marceline Aberdeen's office, VP of Nidosphere Records. Good, this is your title, own it. This will become your kingdom. You're a queen in training, Marceline, and it's time to learn to rule. There will be a board meeting in 10 minutes in the conference room. Bring a pen and paper and take notes. I want you shadowing me today. Okay, I'll meet you there in 5. No, you meet me in my office. We'll go down together. You never wait on them, they wait on you. We are always the last people in the room, and the moment we enter, the meeting begins. Hearing this, Marceline nodded. I'll head to you now, then. See you soon, she said, hanging up the phone. Grabbing her things, Marceline walked to her father's office. The day had been more than busy, meeting after meeting. No wonder her dad flew off the handle the way he did when the schedule was off. Marceline closed the door to her office, placing her notebook onto the desk that was now covered in paperwork and mail. The little wire basket for her mail was empty, as was the incoming paperwork box on her desk. She made a mental note to start bringing her laptop with her to meetings. Dragging piles towards her, Marceline began sorting them. Moments later, her door opened, a young man tossing more documents on her desk. He made to leave, but Marceline's sharp voice stopped him. Excuse me. She was trying so hard to keep her temper reined in. You see those spots on my desk for everything you're throwing here. How about you take the time to drop my mail 2 inches to the left, she asked, glaring at him. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Mrs. Aberdeen, your new VP. So sorry, I'll clean this right up, he said, quickly sorting the documents in the mail. He placed them in their designated places as Marceline watched. The moment he finished, Marceline took the lid off the candy jar, offering him, much to his surprise, a lollipop. Thanks, she said with a smile, putting it back as she sat at her desk starting her work, leaving the man more than confused as he left with his sugary treat. Sorting, filling, and answering correspondences, Marceline felt the day passing. She did appreciate the fact that her dad gave her a corner office with a great view. This view was how she knew the hours were passing by. The sun now had sunk low to the ground, the sky a blazing orange that promised a warm day tomorrow. She gave the sky an appreciative look before turning back to her laptop. It was boring but necessary work, as she typed away her intercom pinged. Reaching over, Marceline pushed the button. Yes? Hi, there's a gentleman here who says he's your husband? You can send him up, she said, going back to her paperwork. She was almost done, and knowing Ignitus like she did, Marceline felt the chance of him doing something silly or fresh in her office was pretty good. The moment she hit save on the current file, a familiar knock came to her door as it opened. Ignitus came in carrying a spider plant and a hanging pot. I come bearing gifts, he said as Marceline stood, leaning across the desk to kiss him. I see that. It's pretty. The lady in the gardening center said these guys like to hang out and just chill, so I figured you could have a friend for work, he said, turning the pot in his hands, revealing the googly eyes that were glued to the planter and the drawn-on smile. Now Marceline laughed. Taking the plant, she hung it near the window, angling it so she could see the silly face on the planter as she worked. So, how'd you spend your day? Marceline asked, leaning against the edge of the desk. Mine was meeting after meeting. It was gross. That's okay. My morning was spent helping Fiona escape the police, he said with a shrug, watching as Marceline blinked in surprise. What on earth happened? Now she paused, closing her eyes as she shook her head. She finally got a hold of Ashley, huh? How bad was it? It's not the worst thing I've seen. I'm sure she could do much worse. I called Ash to see if there was anything he could do to de-escalate, and apparently Ashley is willing to drop it for some money. I let Marshall know, and I'm waiting to hear back on the general verdict. I can't stand her, Marceline said, shaking her head. Are you okay? I know Marshall had that meeting today. How'd you break that up? I'm not proud, but I pulled an ember and grabbed her ear. Oh, you remember how I told you about that lady I walked home that one time in high school? He asked, watching as Marceline nodded. Well, I saw her at the grocery store today, and she wants to make me a pie, he said with a grin, handing Marceline the business card. We should go get a pie sometime, he said, now sitting next to Marceline on the desk's edge. You know, I've been thinking about us a lot. Yeah? She asked softly. Marcy, he noticed, didn't seem too excited by this. Yeah, I was thinking about it a lot. I realized that as much as I see myself as a romantic kind of guy, I've not taken you on a single date, he said, watching the surprise bloom across her face. So I decided that we need to rectify this, Ignitus said, pushing himself off the desk. Marcy, I packed you a bag because we're going away this weekend. Hearing this, she blinked in surprise. We are? Absolutely. Everything's all set. I got everything we need. Also, something lined up timing-wise with our trip, so I'd say it's a good surprise I have planned, he said, now offering her his hand. Holding up a finger, Marceline leaned back, dialing her father's extension. Yes, darling, heading out? Yeah, no plans this weekend? Your schedule's already been cleared, sweetheart. Ignitus called earlier. You're all set. Have a good weekend. I'll see you Monday. Hearing this, Marceline immediately felt a rush of warmth for both her father and Ignitus as she smiled. They were so good to her. Thanks, Daddy. I'll see you Monday. Hanging up, she turned back to Ignitus, who was grinning at her. Ready to go? He asked. Ready to go? Ready to go? She asked. Ready to go? He asked as she smiled, nodding, slipping her hand into his. So, where are we going? Marceline asked as they pulled off the highway. Well, I know it's not far, and I know it'll be less luxurious than your dad's place, but I booked us a hotel for the weekend, and I have somewhere I want to bring you. 2 places, actually, he said as they pulled into the hotel. He parked on the side and led the way through the back door and into the elevator. It was more than obvious that Ignitus had been here before, and knew clearly where they were going. They rode the elevator upwards, and Marceline felt as his fingers brushed against hers. Slipping her hand into his, Marceline rested her head on his shoulder, smiling when she felt his lips against her temple. The elevator dinged and the doors opened, Ignitus once again leading the way. So I called my doctor today, and he said I've been able to drink since my first checkup, and that as long as I feel comfortable lifting, I'm okay because my stitches are out and my incision is healed, he said as they came to a stop at the end of the hall, pulling out the swipe key as he opened the door to their room. Now, this is not going to be the most romantic moment because I have about a 20-second window before it starts to hurt, so I'm going to have to rush this a little bit, just this one time, he said, scooping her up bridal style. Marceline was carried into the hallway of the room and gently sat down, and as he turned to close the door, Marceline walked forward, entranced by the rose petals on the floor. The room opened up at the end of the hall, and Marceline stared in awe. He'd gotten them a suite. The rose petals led off towards a room to the right, and following them, she found the bedroom. Pajamas lay on the edge of the king-size bed, and Marceline swore she fell even deeper in love in that moment. Dropping her bag, she began peeling her work clothes off as she walked farther into the room. He'd given her options: shorts and a t-shirt, a tank top and capris, and one of his shirts and a pair of sweatpants. He knew her too well, and feeling that their day wasn't over yet, she grabbed the capris and the tank top, pulling them on. Turning, she spotted Ignitus in the doorway, and smiling at him, she took the few steps to close the distance between them. The moment they met, she wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him. Thank you. Thank you for the weekend and for all of this, she said with a smile. I'm just happy you chose the capris and not my shirt. It would have been a night in if you did that, he said, smiling back, now resting his forehead on hers. I had a feeling you wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to bring you somewhere special, somewhere you could relax and just be. Do you want to head there now? He asked, watching as Marceline nodded, taking his hand. Lead the way. The drive was quick, and to Marceline's surprise, Ignitus pulled over on the side of the road, near a bridge, turning his truck off. We have to walk from here, he said, grabbing a bag from the back. Leading the way, Ignitus took her hand, walking along the edge of a small river. They passed a tree with an arrow carved in it, then a boulder. It was then she registered the sound of a dull roaring sound, and as they rounded the bend, she stared in wonder at a waterfall. This is your favorite place, Marceline said, smiling at him and looking around. You remember that? He asked, shrugging off the backpack and unzipping it. It was our first game of 20 questions. How could I forget? She watched as he pulled out a blanket, carrying it and the bag towards an overhanging ledge. Kicking off her shoes, Marceline peeled her socks off, shoving them inside. Rolling her pajamas up, she waded into the river. The rocks beneath her feet were smooth to the touch, and crouching down, she began picking through them as she walked to the bank. One in particular she'd found glittered brightly in her hand, and turning, she walked from the water to show Ignitus. Walking up their eyes, she smiled, seeing a small picnic set up. Iggy had been busy. Candles were lit around the blanket on the ground, snacks were set up, and to her surprise she was handed a glass of wine. This, Ignitus said, taking a sip of his own drink, is part one of our weekend. He smiled as she sat down next to him, and reaching for the fruit bowl, he offered her the grapes. Did you find anything cool? He asked, watching as she held out the glittering rock, popping a grape into her mouth. Can I lay my head in your lap? Of course. Wait, can I lay my head in your lap? Of course. Marceline lay back, watching as he grabbed a cracker with cheese and pepperoni. Now he grabbed a strawberry, bringing it to her lips. Marceline taking a bite. She closed her eyes with an appreciative sigh. The fruit was delicious. She could understand why this was his favorite place. It was so serene. And you're sure it'll be dropped. That's what she said, but for real, I'd write up a contract and have her sign it first. Like, I'll go to the police station with her to make sure she drops them, and we can meet up, and you can give her the money. I still think this is bullshit. Extortion, bribery, it's all the same at this point, but I don't care as long as Fiona's out of trouble. I get that, Marsh, but for real, I'll record the exchange and her dropping the charges. I'll call you and I'll record her signing the agreement and send it to you. That way, if you need it, you have it. We can't trust my sister as far as we can throw her, Ash said as Marshall nodded. All right, once you send me the video of her dropping the charges, I'll get the money and meet you guys at your place, Marshall said, saying his goodbyes to Ash and hanging up. Watching in, Walking into Arya's room, Marshall found Fiona in the rocking chair. The moment he spoke, Fiona raised her fingers to her lips. Ari moved, her face scrunched up, and he knew it was too late. Fiona sighed as Ari let out a wailing cry. So you want me to take over? Maybe in a little bit. She should be in a milk coma, and we were almost there. What did Ash say? She asked, now walking the room, soothing their daughter. She agreed. Ash suggested us writing a contract and having her sign it. I'm taking my own precautions, though. Gosh, I know we've talked about your past a time or two before, but we never really talked about her. Not even the concert where she tried to cook you alive. What's her story? More specifically, how did you not see how she's a total psycho? Hearing this, Marshall looked away. His relationship with Ashley was something he hadn't spoken of in years. Honestly, he'd hoped to never have to speak about it again, or even think back on it. When you're wearing rose-colored glasses, red flags just look like flags, he said softly. Dinner's almost ready. Marshall walked from the room. With the sudden change in conversation, Fiona knew this was a topic Marshall was trying to avoid. Right now, however, crying baby and all, she would not be swayed. Instead, she followed after him downstairs and into the kitchen. She watched as he leaned against the counter, and the moment she saw his head dip, Fiona knew Marshall was making a choice. She said nothing as she rocked Arya, soothing her sleepy whimpers. She used to put her lit cigarettes out on me. He'd said it so quietly, it had taken Fiona a moment to register that he was speaking. When his words sunk in, however, all she felt was an icy chill. She liked hiding my sunblock and my umbrellas, gloves, and my sweatshirts. I found out she was throwing them out when we get into arguments. The way he was speaking was forced and rushed. Fiona had a feeling that if she were to stop him now, or interrupt him in any way, she might never hear the rest of this. She listened, her heart aching as he took another breath. Any time she got drunk or we got into an argument, she would beat the ever-loving crap out of me because she knew I wouldn't hit her back, and she thought it was funny. She used that to her advantage more times than I can remember, he said with a hoarse laugh. The sound broke Fiona's heart. There was nothing funny about this. There are pictures of me where you can see the scratches on my face and the bruises, but I was smiling, so nobody saw anything wrong. They all thought I just got into another fight, he said, still not facing her as he took a shaking breath. She got me into a lot of fights. We'd get into arguments over the smallest things, and she would tell me that I was defective, that I was broken, and that nobody would ever want me or want to love me because of my disorder. She'd call me a freak one minute and be hitting me the next for not taking my hood off to take a picture with her in broad daylight. We were on and off for a little over a year and a half, and everything started just weeks in. What she did a few weeks ago, that's not the first time she's done that to me. I was 16 the first time, and she was 19. She was lying about being on birth control, and I caught her poking holes in the condoms, too. There was a 4-month span of time where I was freaking out because I thought she was pregnant, and she wouldn't tell me one way or another. She'd take a test and wouldn't let me see it. Every time I questioned anything or brought it up, she'd just start wailing on me and saying that it was all my fault that things were this way, Marshall said, now turning to face Fiona. I had to tell myself for months that she was crazy, just so I wouldn't go back. I had the guys tell me she was crazy so I wouldn't go back. She drilled into me so hard in our relationship that I was worthless, and nothing that I believed her. When I went on that I don't care streak the year before I met you, I figured if I could just get her out of my head, if I could feel something other than all this pain and self-loathing, then I could leave the past behind me and forget about it. But I never forgot about it. It stayed with me, even in our relationship. Hearing this, Fiona squeezed Ollie close to her. She was afraid now of what he would say. Were there things she said to him jokingly that caused wounds like these to reopen? Had she ever hit him? Suddenly, the memory of their fight after his cancer diagnosis ricocheted through her mind. After he'd broken up with her, she had hit him. At the thought, she could feel the stinging in her palm and felt her eyes burn. She was no better than Ashley. I know you would never do anything like that to me, Fiona, but I did when you broke up with me. The next day I came here, and the first thing I did was hit you, she said, sounding devastated. That's not the same, Marshall said, giving her a concerned look. Yes, it is. I never should have raised my hand to you ever. Marshall, I'm so sorry. Fiona watched as he opened his arms and walked into his embrace, burying her face into the crook of his neck. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgave you now, and I forgave you then, and I forgive you now. I know you don't want me to justify it, but I still think I deserve that for how I hurt you, he said, feeling as Fiona shook her head, her hand keeping Ari's face from being squished between them. You never deserved that. In his arms, Fiona felt Marshall's phone vibrate in his pocket. He released her, fishing for it, and swiping the screen, Fiona saw a video. Marshall angled the screen so she could see and press play. This is complete bullshit, Ashton, Ashley said, scowling at him. Well, if you could speak more than 2 sentences without a lie coming out of your mouth, then we could all trust you, Ash's annoyed voice said from behind the camera. They walked into the police station, and Ashley began talking to the officer behind the glass. Yeah, I want to drop them. Turns out I was trying to get with her man. Ash watched closer, now showing her signing the document and signing himself as a witness. Can she reopen this ever again after signing these? Ash asked as the forms were slipped underneath the glass to the officer. No, this will be officially counted as closed. A new investigation would have to be opened if that were the case. The officer said. So, not this? Exactly. Great. Can I get a time-stamped copy of this? The officer left and returned. Ash and Ashley walked out of the police station, and once they got to the parking lot, the camera turned to face him. According to the officers and this paper in my hand, all charges and investigations into Fiona because of this crap with Ashley is over and done. When the hell do I get my money? Came Ashley's voice from off-screen. You're not getting any money, Ash said incredulously. I lied to you. Marshall may have been willing to keep his end of the deal and pay your ass, but I'm not letting him do this shit. You've caused him enough problems. The best part is that nothing you can do can change this because it's done, so you might as well accept it. Ashton, you... The video stopped there and Marshall sighed. He hadn't expected this. Moments later, his phone pinged with a text from Ash. Ash, just pulled in the driveway. Ashley isn't with me. Come get these papers. It's good proof to have, and now she can't hold this over your guys' heads. 8:32 p.m. Fiona watched as Marshall walked from the room. Deciding to put down the baby, Fiona made her way upstairs. Grabbing her phone, Fiona sent a thank you text to Ash. She didn't know if she could ever trust him again, but this was a start. Her mind now wandered to Marshall and everything he just told her. Fiona knew there was a lot of thinking Fiona knew there was a lot of thinking she needed to do. Marceline understood his intentions. Tonight they had the same goal, though the way Ignitus was going about it was interesting to say the least. She swore she'd never spoken this much during an intimate encounter in her life. Again, she'd uttered the word that brought everything to a slow crawl. Yellow, she said, feeling the anxiety coiling in her stomach. Immediately he stopped, pulling back. Tell me, he asked gently, taking her hands, was it when I grabbed your hips? Marceline shook her head. It was more your nails, she said quietly, looking away from him for what felt like the umpteenth time. It's the way they felt. Again, like all the other times, he reached towards her, tilting her face towards his. That's okay, no more nails, he said, rubbing his thumb on her cheek, watching as she smiled. This had been how their evening had gone after they'd come back from their waterfall snack date. They'd stayed until the sun sank low beneath the ground, and once the stars had come out, they returned to the hotel. Ignitus had learned a great deal in the short time they'd been at this, and their clothes weren't even off yet. So far, Marshall had been right. It was the smallest things that made her uncomfortable, and he was keeping note of all of them. Any grip on her upper arms she did not like, nor the sharp bite of his nails, or the way he'd leaned over her on the bed earlier. It was becoming more and more obvious to him, the pattern these things were following. Marceline did not like being restrained in any way beneath him, or sandwiched between him and anything that prevented a means of escape. As this was becoming clearer, their past moments were starting to make more sense. Marceline had been more open when she was the one leading the way and taking charge. She was far less nervous when she was the one in control. Again, he waited for her to be ready. There would be no rushing on his end, because as slow and dragging as this felt, it was all a means to an end. If he could get this down, he'd never have to worry about upsetting her like this again. He'd be able to hold her and touch her and know where those boundaries lay. Slowly, Marcy reached forward, her hand resting on his knee, creeping up his thigh as she scooted close again. Green, she whispered as she closed her eyes, leaning in, feeling as his lips met hers. He leaned her down on the bed, and Marceline felt this was heading back into yellow territory. But to her surprise, instead of being on her back, she was on her side, and so was he. She felt no thrum of anxiety and no coiling pit of nerves as they lay there. His hand moved along the curves of her body, slowly moving from her shoulder to her waist, to her hip, down her thigh, and back up. Is this okay? He asked, watching as she nodded back. You know I want to heal you, he said softly, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Is this okay? Are you comfortable with this? Yes. Marceline reached forward, placing her hand against his chest, moving it up towards his shoulder. She watched as his eyes closed as he sighed. Did you not like that? Did you not like that? She asked, pulling her hand back, though in moments her hand was covered by his, keeping it in place. I can't get enough of you touching me, he said, opening his eyes to look at her. Please don't stop. Again, she reached forward, her hand resting on his chest, slowly moving around his side and to his back. The feel of her fingers against his skin felt electric. He wanted nothing more than to crash his lips to hers, to hold her so close and kiss every bit of skin he could reach, and feel the scrape of her nails on his back. He wanted to kiss his way up her neck and listen to the sounds she made while he did so. There were so many things he wanted to do right now. The moment her lips touched his, he damn near lost every shred of self-control he'd had as he kissed her back desperately. In a blink, he reined himself in. Ignitus refused to ruin the progress they made tonight by pushing her too far, too fast. Marceline's face was flushed, her breath matching his. Reaching towards him, Marceline brought her lips to his. She could feel him holding back, trying so hard for her, trying not to scare or overwhelm her with his actions. This she was okay with. The way he was holding her, she didn't feel trapped like this. She felt safe. This felt safe. His hands moved tentatively now. She could feel the gentle touch of his fingers on her back as his hand slid under her shirt. This, he realized, was okay. Marceline was relaxing into his touch now, leaning towards it as he continued. He was more than surprised at what she said next. I want you to kiss my neck. Wish granted, thank you. The skin on her neck was so soft against his lips, and the sounds she was making, he couldn't get enough of them. He couldn't get enough of any of it. The silky soft touch of her skin, her panting gasps, the trembling pitch of her voice. The more she gave, the more he wanted, and right now he wanted nothing more than to sink his teeth into that one sweet spot on her neck that turned her into a trembling mess of desire. Marceline had always liked that, but now he wasn't sure. I want you to do that thing I like, she gasped. She gasped, leaving him stunned. There may be a god. Are you sure? He asked, his hand now tangling into the hair at the nape of her neck. Yes, she breathed, feeling that tantalizing sensation as his grip tightened. His actions were careful as he watched her for a reaction. Green, she whispered, watching as his eyes widened. Now she tilted her head, angling her to have better access, planting slow, deliberate kisses up her neck to that sweet spot. He listened as her breath hitched, as he grazed her skin with his teeth. Green, green, green. There is a god. Ignitus bit down, sucking gently on her neck. Before planting another kiss, moving up a fraction of an inch to start the process all over again. Each time he moved closer to that one spot, Ignitus felt Marceline's nails digging further into his back as she pulled him closer. Finally, he hit it, and the moment he did, he felt her nails dig into his shoulder, clawing down his back as she gasped loudly, Green! Oh, baby, I know it is. Her hand tangled into his hair, angling her neck away, and understanding her unspoken request, he pulled back. Nidus hadn't even had a moment to breathe before Marceline's lips crashed against his. His leg wrapped around his hip. Her leg wrapped around his hip, pulling him closer. To his surprise, she flipped them, pinning him to the mattress beneath her as she sat astride him. Her face was flushed, and she closed her eyes, feeling his hands rubbing along her thighs. How are you feeling about this? He asked gently, Marceline's hand covering his, their fingers lacing together. Good, she said, feeling as he moved his hands to rest on her hips. I like this. Sitting upright, they were nose to nose, and Ignitus watched the blush spreading across her cheeks. And this? He asked. I really like this. Marceline breathed, her hand slipping under the hem of his shirt as she pulled it up and over his head. Marshall lay on the bed, glancing at the screen on the baby monitor. Arya was knocked out. It was late, and Fiona still hadn't come to bed. This wasn't normal for her, and climbing from the bed, Marshall walked from the room. He found Fiona sitting in the living room, writing in a notebook with Kate curled up next to her. When she heard him coming down the stairs, she looked up at him from the couch. Coming to bed? He asked, watching as Fiona closed the notebook. Yeah, I was just clearing my head some. You okay? He asked, now leaning over the back of the couch. Am I? Are you? Fiona asked, turning to look at him. I'm fine, but I dumped a lot on you, Fiona. Nothing I didn't ask you to, she said, watching as he shook his head. It's a lot of baggage, he said, looking away from her. You aren't your baggage. You said to me once that if you could never accept my past, how could you ever truly show me that you love me? She said, turning to face him. You were right. Loving you means loving all of you, your past, your present, and our future, not picking and choosing bits and pieces or the parts of your history I like best, Fiona said, now placing her hand on his cheek. I love you, and I'll continue to love you regardless of what our future brings. You can quote me from memory? He asked, looking surprised. For me, that's probably one of the most formative memories of our relationship. So, yes, she said with a smile. Marshall, I promise I'll never ever hit you again. Not as a joke. Never again. We can still have our play fights, but I never want to put you in I never want to put you in the position where you don't feel happy and comfortable, Fiona said sadly. Fiona, every day with you I feel more than happy and comfortable, he said, now sitting next to Fiona, who leaned against him. I feel loved with you, he said, pulling her legs across his lap, slipping his hand into hers. I feel safe with you. I feel cared for and cherished. You make me feel so lucky to have you in my life. I know you feel the same way. I do. But from now on, I want you to be honest with me when I do things that hurt you. I want you to tell me right then and there so I can fix it. I will within reason. Does that work for you? Marshall, would you ever hit me because I wouldn't endanger myself for you? He asked, watching as immediately Fiona frowned. Never. Would you call me names and degrade me in front of people just because you could? Marshall asked as Fiona shook her head. Oh, but I still hit you. Why are you so determined to be the bad guy? Marshall asked, sounding frustrated now. Because I've been selfish emotionally in this relationship. I've only been looking after myself. I worried about you, and I cared for you physically, but I never. Now she sighed. You took the time to learn my baggage. You learned how to care for my emotional wounds, my mental and my physical wounds too, but not once have I done the same for you. But I am now. I want to. I want to be here for you in the same ways you're here for me. How about this? Marshall said, squeezing her hand. I'll let you know if I'm feeling some kind of way, and we'll work out together how to fix it, he said, watching as Fiona made a face. And I promise I'll be more open and vocal about how things make me feel. If it's something that bothers me, I'll tell you about it. Hearing this, Fiona nodded. I promise to do a better job of taking care of you, she said, closing her eyes as Marshall leaned in, bringing his lips to hers. I guess I could let you take care of me and love me endlessly. I don't think it would be all that bad, Marshall said playfully, Fiona giggling and squirming in his lap as his fingers tickled her sides. Stopping, he allowed Fiona to settle in his arms as he kissed the top of her head. With everything that had gone on today, they hadn't even had a chance to discuss his meeting with Litch. He'd already had a concert date set for their return tour in 5 weeks' time. This was definitely something to discuss with the band. With that thought, Marshall yawned. You ready for bed? You ready for bed? Fiona asked, feeling as he nodded his head. It's been a long day, he said, releasing his hold on the blonde in his arms and letting her stand. I can't wait for bed, he said, reaching for the lamp and flicking it off before following Fiona up the stairs. Everything else could wait until tomorrow. Right now, Marshall wanted nothing more than to just fall asleep with Fiona in his arms. The moment he flopped on the bed, pulling her close, Marshall felt as her fingers laced into his. Closing his eyes, he drifted off, feeling of Fiona's steady breaths lulling him to sleep. Okay. Marshall's statement about rose-colored glasses and red flags was something my brother once told me. Thanks, Ray. Uh, the first time I heard that was in BoJack Horseman, actually. Alright. I think, that's gonna be it for tonight. I'm gonna try and record another chapter in the morning and then post all 3 chapters. Although, I'm depending on timing, I might not be able to post the chapters tomorrow because I have the day with my mom. I'll try and make it work so that I can upload the chapters in time, but like, I'm not gonna push myself, so if I can't upload the chapters until Sunday, then I won't upload the chapters until Sunday. But in the meantime, I'm going to bed. Well, I'm getting ready for bed because it's almost 9 o'clock, so I gotta go and I gotta take my pills and then I gotta do what I gotta do. Chapter 103 Triggered. Sunday mornings meant bacon pancakes. There was no other alternative, and especially not since Fiona had come up with a version of her own. She pulled the crispy bacon out of the oven, letting them drain on a paper towel, before chopping the strips and mixing them into the pancake batter. While Fiona made breakfast, Marshall was feeding Arya the eggs she'd scrambled. The morning was peaceful and quiet until their phones went off. Fiona and Marshall shared a look of confusion as both of their phones began pinging like crazy. Marshall grabbed his phone from the table, checking it. "It looks like Finn added us to a group chat," he said as Ari ate another bite of egg. "Yeah? Who all else?" "Your parents, Jake, a number I don't know, and that's weird, Ig and Marcy are on it, too." Marshall said, now skimming through the texts. "What's it say?" "Aw, shoot, Finn's making moves." "We're going to an impromptu barbecue at the Forest Center." "What, is he finally proposing to Emperor?" Fiona asked jokingly as she poured the pancake batter into the pan. Marshall's surprised voice left her blown away. "Actually, yeah." Quickly, she whipped around to face him. "Are you for real? Marshall, do not play. You know they're my OTP," Fiona said, hurrying over to look at the phone he offered. "No way," Fiona said, swiping through the conversation. "No way." Now she dialed Finn's number. "Hey, Mart." "No way. Oh my gosh, Finn, I'm so excited for you." Fiona gushed, absolutely over the moon for her brother. "Well, don't get too excited. She still has to actually accept my proposal." "Oh, come on. Do you really think Ember would say no?" Fiona asked, flipping her pancakes. "Nothing wrong with not wanting to drink it, but I've got to let you go. I can hear her getting up. Later." "Bye," she said, placing the phone on the table and jumping with excitement. "I'm so happy," she squealed, feeling as if she was about to burst. "Well, you're over the moon," Marshall said, his amusement more than obvious. "Of course I am. I never thought it would happen at this rate." Plating the pancakes, she placed them in front of Marshall, grabbing a fork and the syrup for him. "Thank you. Looks like he wants us there at noon. It's at some pond with a willow pavilion." "Oh my gosh, he listened!" Marshall jumped at her scream, unable to find his confused terror. Duh. "Can you clue me in, or should I continue to be as afraid as I am?" Marshall said, watching as Fiona flipped her bacon pancakes. "I told Finn a bunch of places years ago. This was number one on the list. The pond is beautiful and has a wide dock, so it's good for photos. There's a covered pavilion there with barbecue grills, and in spring the trees are flowering. It's gorgeous," she said, unable to stop grinning. Ember and Finn. Ember walked from the bedroom, rubbing her face as she yawned, and with a gasp she stumbled over Wolfie's tug rope, catching herself before she tripped. With a sharp whistle, he was by her side as Ember stared at him. "What did I tell you about leaving your toys around? Go put it away," she said, watching as he grabbed the rope, trotting into the living room and hopping on the couch. "Good morning, gorgeous," Finn said from the kitchen as he whisked eggs in the bowl, watching her go by. Her hair was bedhead perfection meets electrical socket disaster. He couldn't help but smirk at her as she walked by, knowing it was entirely his fault. "Bite me." "Maybe later," he said with a grin as she walked into the bathroom. Ooh, she was grumpy this morning. This mood, Finn was certain, would definitely not last through the day. Things between them were back to normal almost instantaneously after that trip she went on with Ignitus. He thought they were going to pick up the remains of her grandfather. He'd even made a space on the shelf for him so Ember would have a place to put him. Never in a million years did he imagine she would return with the news she had brought. He'd been stunned to learn of her grandfather, and even more so, she wanted him to meet him. "This is bullshit. Ugh!" Ember walked by before returning back to the bedroom with a towel, grumbling under her breath as she went. The door slammed, and the sound of the shower running was heard. Pulling his eggs off the fire, Finn gave them a final stir and covered them. Walking over, he looked at the calendar, spotting the shark sticker on tomorrow's date as understanding sunk in. Well, that explains why she was all over me last night, and why she has an attitude now. This kind of works in my favor, though. Walking to the bathroom, he knocked, walking in. Want me to make you coffee or hot cocoa with whipped cream? He asked, watching as her blurry form paused. Can I have cocoa? Absolutely, Mom. Absolutely. Want me to wash your back before I go? Now she leaned back, peeking her head through the curtain. Really? Yeah. I would love that. Thank you. He watched as she sat on the edge of the tub, her back to him. Thankfully, he had gone out and bought the back scrubber she'd casually mentioned at least a dozen times. Finn grabbed it from the cabinet and, flipping it to the scrubby side, he wet it, drizzling her soap onto the scrubber before lathering up her back in small circles. Oh my gosh, you got the scrubby thing I wanted, Ember said, the smile obvious in her voice. She felt as he washed her back shoulders and the back of her neck. With a kiss, he handed her the scrubber. Thank you, Finn. No problem. I have a day planned for us, so once you're done, we'll have breakfast and bounce. Though I think I need to add a new stop on our list of adventures, he said as she smiled up at him. You finish up in here, and I'll finish breakfast, Finn said, walking from the room. By the time Ember was out and dressed, Finn put together the breakfast sandwiches and had them wrapped in tin foil. That, she knew, was his unspoken way of saying it was time to go, so slipping on her sandals, she grabbed her purse, accepting the sandwich Finn offered. Okay, where to first? Ember asked as Finn held the door open, letting her walk out first. Well, I had planned to make cocoa, but we don't have any, so our first stop is to get you some, he said. We can also go on a nice walk and see if the leaves are starting to change color yet, too. That would be really nice. Ignitus and Marceline. Okay, I can do this. I can totally do this. They passed the familiar SUV, and seeing that it was empty, Ignitus let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He'd seen the group text and had seen his father's number. He knew he would be here, especially today. Anything for Ember, but still he was here for the same reasons. Marceline's hand slipped into his, and looking over, he smiled at her. The pavilion was being set up with decorations by Mrs. Wright and Fiona. Marshall was in the covered area in the shade, with who was manning the grill. Finn's brother sat on the picnic table, tuning what looked like a large violin, and his children were being herded into seats at the picnic table by his wife. Fiancé? Were they married yet? Ignitus wasn't sure, but Marceline's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Hey, Mama Bear, need any help with the setup? She called to Mrs. Wright. What? Wait. Who is talking? Hang on. What? Hey, Mama Bear, need any help with the setup? She called to Mrs. Wright. Absolutely, sweetie. You're taller than I am, and I have to tie up this banner. Ignitus continued looking around. Where the hell are they? That's no problem, Ma. Ig, can you hold me steady while I go up? Marceline asked, watching as his attention snapped quickly to her. You need me to what? He asked, glancing around quickly before focusing on her. She smiled. I need you to hold me steady as I climb up. Don't get lost looking at the view, she said, smirking, climbing up the wooden stepladder. Ignitus held her steady, his eyes not once taking in the absolute perfection that was several inches away from his face as she tied up the banner. He was too focused on finding his father. So, where are the parents of the soon-to-be bride? Ignitus asked. Fiona was quick to answer. Mom is on the dock setting up the proposal area. Dad went to the bathrooms up there, she said, pointing towards the building on the hill. His eyes remained glued to the restrooms, and as Marceline climbed down, his father exited the building. Once he was sure Marceline was safe on the ground, he gave her hip a quick pat before walking over to Marshall and Mr. Wright, leaving her to a conversation with Fiona. Ignitus chose his spot sitting in the chair next to Marshall, facing everyone, his back to the forest. The only thing that would be sneaking up on him would be Bambi. Exciting day. Think Em will say yes? Hearing this, Ignitus chuckled. Of course she will. She loves that idiot. You okay with it? Yeah, we've come to an agreement. I love that he's 2 years older than I am, but he's terrified of me. Now Marshall laughed. Where's Ari? Kleptoed by her aunt and cousins. Glancing over, he spotted Ari on the lap of Charlie, the curly-haired blonde. Looking up back, he noticed that something was off about his friend. He looked nervous. You okay? Well, I don't know, but not good. What's up? Is it your parents? Something like that, he said in a tight voice, his knee bouncing as his father walked into the shade of the pavilion. Ig, what's wrong? Quickly he stood. He couldn't do this. I'm fine. I forgot something in the truck. In a blink before Marshall could say another word, he was gone, heading off in the direction of the parking lot. Something was up with him, and the way he was acting was weirdly familiar. Marshall didn't know what was wrong, but he wanted to find out what. Finn and Ember. The trip for Coco was quick, but to Ember's surprise after, they pulled up to a nail salon. This to her was weird. Finn would never willingly come to one of these places because he always complained about the weird smells. "What are we doing here?" she asked, looking at him in confusion. "Well, you didn't seem to be too happy when you got up, and you haven't gone here in a bit, so I figured I'd get you one of those mani-pedis you like. That's what they're called, right?" he asked, watching as she nodded slowly. "Yeah, who are you, and what have you done with my boyfriend?" Ember asked slowly, now turning in the car seat to look at him. He laughed, but Ember was more than confused. "Seriously, you're weirding me out. Normally, I don't know, normally if we were out of cocoa, then it would have just been tough luck. Or if you'd make breakfast, I'd have to put my own together, because you'll eat without me if I'm in the shower. But didn't you say you didn't like that?" "Yeah, but you listened." "I'm weirding you out because I listened?" he asked, still laughing. "No, I'm glad you listened. It made me happy. I just... Ember, you know you're allowed to be happy. It's not a trick or a distraction. I want you to be happy, and I'm doing what I can to make it happen," Finn said gently. Ember, to his surprise, was on the edge of tears, and not happy ones. In this moment, he genuinely was happy he'd talked to a brother before doing this. A lot of what he'd said was making sense now. Flashback. "Alright, no bullshit. You want to marry my sister? What do you know about her?" Ignitus asked, looking at Finn over the beer bottle. "Ask me anything within reason," Finn said with a shrug. "Fine, but for clarity, what's not within reason?" "Bullshit questions, like her imaginary best friend from third grade's cousin's name." Finn watched as Ignitus scowled, scoffing as he looked away, and instantly Finn understood his game. He never planned on taking this seriously. He glared at him until finally he excited him. "Fine, Finn, who does she love most in the world?" Ignitus asked, taking a drink, staring Finn down as he did. Finn never broke eye contact as he spoke. "Dude, you! Duh! At least give me a hard one, jeez." "Damn right, you know I'm not going anywhere," he asked, Finn now confused. "I wouldn't want you to. Why would I want you to? Ember loves you beyond all reason and then some. Why would I ever even think of trying to keep her away from you?" Finn asked, still being stared down as he spoke. "Do you even trust me with her?" This was something Finn was genuinely curious to know, and waited for his answer. After a moment of reflection from Ignitus, he got it. "I do, actually, which is why I'm being sure. Do you know what genuinely scares my sister?" he asked, draining his drink, watching as Finn thought for a moment, leaning back in his chair. "I know losing you is a big one, losing people she loves, but other than that, Em comes off pretty fearless." "She does. She's really good at that, actually," he said with a grin. "Happiness. Emma's terrified to be happy. Our parents used to do these big, extravagant things to distract her whenever they wanted to hide something bad from her. They would just keep building it up higher and higher until they couldn't keep up the charade. Then they wouldn't even try to hide it anymore. The whole illusion would come crashing down, and we'd be thrown completely into the middle of a shitstorm without even a warning. Her school trip abroad was one of those things, hiding everything about Papa," he said, handing his bottle to the waitress, Finn doing the same. "There's a few things along these lines with Emma that I want to be sure you understand. Sometimes she gets weird when things seem to be going her way for too long. She gets nervous that something bad's about to happen and mess it up," he said, taking a sip of the new drink placed in front of him. "Don't think that didn't follow her into adulthood either. You ever notice how she hates things being given to her? Or if it's something that's too easy to have, she either doesn't want it or feels the need to work extra hard, so she feels like she deserves it? So for real, don't panic if she says no. It's not a real no. Is this you saying yes? This is me telling you that you need to realize that your new job is to be a protector, Finn. Emma looks fearless, but she isn't. Sure, she's confident as all get out, but Emma's human. It's exhausting. She's built herself up so much that she's afraid to let things in, because things don't stay. I know that. I've seen it a lot, actually. You do know that I'm not taking the protector job from you, right?" Finn asked with a grin. "Of course, you say that like it was ever a possibility. I'm always going to be protective of her, especially now because of the shit I've seen," he said with a shrug, watching as Finn frowned, now staring at him. You know, you weren't the only guy Marceline wasn't allowed to talk to anymore, Finn said, watching as Ignitus's eyes snapped to his. You don't have to worry about me changing after we get engaged, or after we get married. I'm not some secret douchebag in disguise. I just genuinely love Ember. I want to spend our lives together. I knew I was in love the moment I laid my eyes on her, Finn said, taking a sip of his own drink. If I recall correctly, a response to my love-struck staring was to tell me to take a picture because it would last longer, Finn said, watching as he grinned. Yeah, that sounds like me, Ignitus said with a laugh, before staring at Finn seriously. You do realize this isn't going to be a one-and-done conversation about Emma, right? Look, we can do this as many times as you want. Ember's all I want. I want her morning attitude. I want her cold feet touching me when we sleep. I want her squeezing my arm when she needs to relax. Do you squeeze her back? Ignitus asked, furrowing his brow as he leaned forward. Finn matched his pose, leaning forward now as well. No, should I? Ignitus shook his head in disappointment. You absolutely should. Yeah, you absolutely should. Try to match the pressure she gives. It's a grounding thing with her. If she's off the charts anxious or starting to freak out, a good squish session will do her good. Hearing this, Finn nodded his head in recognition. That's what she says when she squeezes my arm. Squish, Finn said, watching as Ig nodded his head. Yeah, squeeze back. Get her in kind of a one-armed hug. Get her in kind of a one-armed hug so she can hold on to your arm. That way she can squeeze your arm and you can squeeze her back. But physical pressure is a huge thing with Emma and calming her down. It doesn't have to be a hug every time either. Sometimes just squeezing her hand will do the trick, he said, now holding out his hand and motioning for Finn's hand. You don't want to squeeze the hell out of her hand, because that would just hurt and make her spasm more. You want firm, long squeezes, he said, now squeezing Finn's hand tightly in his own, holding it, and slowly releasing pressure. Kind of like a wave, he said, releasing Finn's hand and offering out his own. You try. Dude, I'm not holding your hand at a bar. To Finn's surprise, Ignitus stood. Excuse me, everyone, he called, cupping his hands around his mouth, Finn's face burning in experience. This guy right here, blonde dude with the white bear's hat, is afraid to hold my hand because we're in a bar. Would anyone be offended if he held my hand? Anyone at all? No? He asked, looking around before finally looking back at Finn, whose face was beet red. Where's your excuse now? Fine, I'll hold your damn hand, Finn said, snatching it and squeezing it. That's not tight enough, he said, taking a sip of his drink, winking at the waitress as she passed by, eyeing their joined hands. Is this some ritualistic hazing welcome to the family crap? Finn asked, feeling as his face slowly faded back to its normal color. Unfortunately not. That happens during our next chat. Now squeeze like you're firmly holding a small child's hand, he said, feeling as Finn squeezed his hand again. Perfect. You want to hold this tight, but not overly so. He said, allowing Finn to release his hand. Know that I do trust you with my baby sister. I'm not saying yes yet, but I do trust you. For her life partner, I think she made a decent choice. And flashback. Reaching forward, Finn took Ember's hand in his own, squeezing it tightly and slowly releasing pressure. On the second squeeze, Ember's hand tightened on his, matching the pressure. He watched as she relaxed, closing her eyes and taking a breath. These moments were normally the ones that would have turned into a fight, and that was because he didn't understand before. Ember's questioning him wasn't to undermine him or to just try and pick a fight because she was bored. Thanks to Ignitus, he knew now. Ember was waiting for the rug to be pulled from beneath her feet, and was actively trying to avoid it by asking these kinds of questions. I just want to see you happy. It's my job to make sure you're happy. All I want is to take care of you, he said with a grin. Ready to get your nails done? He asked, watching as she nodded, now smiling. Yeah, let's go. Together they walked through the wooded path, listening to the sounds of birds chirping as they went. The forest was quiet and so peaceful. The leaves were starting to lose that deep green, and several trees were starting to have yellow patches of leaves. As they continued, Finn genuinely couldn't hold back his nervous excitement. He could feel the ring box in his pocket resting against his leg, and knew the time was steadily approaching. They'd get to Willow Pavilion in the next 5 minutes or so. Checking his phone for the time, Finn saw that it was almost 11:55. Everyone at this point should be there waiting for them. Ember's voice interrupted his thoughts. I still can't believe I convinced you to get a pedicure with me, she said, unable to hold back a grin. That was amazing. Like, holy crap, Em, I get it now. Finn said as Ember laughed. I'm glad I could convince you to do it. Nah, for real, that was a game changer. I didn't know they massaged your feet and legs. I didn't even realize my feet hurt. Ember leaned against him as they walked, still smiling. Pedicures are amazing, Finn. I've been telling you that for years, and all you do is work on your feet. But the rocks, though, those hot rocks were on another level, Finn said as he shook his head, lost in thought at the hot rock massage he'd gotten during the pedicure Ember had convinced him to get. His thoughts were interrupted again as he listened to her contented sigh. Thank you for doing this, Finn. I'm having a great day, Ember said, looking over at Finn with a sweet smile. I really, really am. Well, I'm glad. I just hope it keeps getting better, he said, squeezing her hand as the path they were on opened up to a beautiful field and a white dock up ahead. The pond water glistened in the sunlight ahead of them. Speaking of things getting better, I wanted to ask how you're feeling. I wanted to ask how you're feeling about us after everything lately. You still like me, right? Finn asked with a smile, watching as Ember rolled her eyes, but smiled back. I think everything's great with us right now, Ember said, following Finn onto the dock, leaning on the railing, looking over into the water. Me too. I was talking with Jake a while back, and he said something that really stuck with me. I thought that changing our relationship's title would have to change everything about us, and that scared me. But he made me realize that nothing between us has to change. Changing the title of our relationship doesn't have to change the nature of it, he said, taking her hand and kneeling down, watching as her hand flew to her mouth. Finn, you once told me that if I asked you properly, you'd think about marrying me, so here, in this beautiful place, he said, squeezing her hand firmly, feeling as Ember squeezed back tightly, her whole body trembling. In front of everyone who loves you, with your dad's permission, and most importantly, with your brother's permission and approval. Ember, will you marry me? Finn asked, now offering the ring box in his hand. The seconds felt like hours as Ember stood there, and the moment she began nodding her head, Finn felt as if his heart exploded. With one word, she was in his arms, practically knocking them into the pond as she kissed him, tears in her eyes. That one word. Yes. Marceline and Ignitus. Marceline looked up at her chat from her chat with Fiona when she heard a terribly familiar voice. Is there anything else that needs to be done, Ellen? Looking over, she felt a twinge of anger as Ignitus's father began talking with Ellen. Ignitus had been different after the incident with his father. He barely slept, and when he did, all he had were nightmares. More than once she'd woken him waking in a cold sweat, trying to push away a gun that was no longer there. Looking around now, Marceline realized that Ignitus was nowhere to be seen. She looked towards Marshall, who he'd been with last. To her surprise, when she caught his eye, Marshall pointed to the lot they'd parked in and shrugged his shoulders. Nodding in thanks, she headed towards the parking lot. Marceline spotted him sitting in the truck, his head resting on the steering wheel. She tried opening the door, but it was locked. Click. At the sound of the handle trying to click open, Ignitus jumped, facing her, looking more than startled. Blinking in recognition, he leaned over and unlocked the door. Iggy, are you okay? She asked, feeling only concern, watching as he shook his head. My heart's gonna beat out of my chest, my stomach hurts, and I can't breathe, he said, taking gasping breaths. Ig, she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, feeling as he flinched. Babe, I think you're having a panic attack. It's not that you can't breathe, you just can't feel the air moving in your lungs. Give me your hand, she said softly, and taking the hand he reached towards her. Marceline rested it on her chest, earning his confused look. Breathe with me. As she took a long, slow breath in, he could feel her chest rise. Don't just watch me. Inhale, she said as he took a breath, trying to match her. Exhale. He closed his eyes, breathing out, feeling as her chest lowered. In, his heart rate was slowing. Out, his hands were shaking less. In, his breathing started to steady. Out, he opened his eyes. You okay? Did that help? Marceline asked, her hand gently massaging his neck. I do feel a bit better, he said softly. Good, it's almost noon. We're gonna want to head back if we want to watch the proposal. Okay. His voice was still tight. Placing her hand on his, Marceline leaned forward, giving him a kiss. Iggy, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise it's going to be okay. You're safe. There's nothing you can do if he tries to shoot me again. Marceline felt a chill at these words. He wasn't wrong. To her surprise, he opened the door, climbing out. Following suit, Marceline exited the truck, meeting him at the front, taking his hand and squeezing it tightly in hers. Together they walked back to the pavilion just in time to see the group crowding the edge within sight of the dock. Seeing this, Ignitus ran over, pulling Marceline along with him. When they arrived, they were just in time to watch Finn sink to one knee and Ember's hand fly to her mouth. Ignitus couldn't help but smile at the sight as Ember nodded, launching herself at Finn, almost knocking them both into the water as she kissed him. Marceline rested her head on his shoulder, sharing a smile with Ig as he looked at her. Finn now had motion towards the pavilion, and he and Ember waved to the group as they made their way up the hill. Once they made it to the top, the first thing Ember did was run to her brother, hugging him tightly and kissing his cheek. "I can't believe you actually told him yes," she said with tears in his eyes. "I could say the exact same thing, Em," he said with a laugh, releasing her. "Let's see it," he said, spotting the ring on her finger. As she held her hand out towards him, all the girls gathering around them to look at her ring. Ignitus was more than happy for his baby sister. Finn was a good guy, and he was certain that Ember would be well taken care of. Glancing up, he spotted their parents approaching, and immediately backpedaled towards Marshall, wanting to be as far from them as possible, while still being able to keep his eyes on them. That plan was shot when a gentle hand rested on his shoulder, making him jump. "Don't go too far, sweetie. We're going to do family photos on the dock," Mrs. Wright said, beaming at him. "Ember will definitely want one with you." Hearing this, he nodded, knowing Ember like he did. She would want those photos, too. "You okay, hon?" "Yeah," he said, smiling back. "I'm just going to be with Marshall," he said as she gave him an appraising look. Finally, with a nod, she joined the others, looking at Ember's ring, and turning, he headed right to the seat he practically run from 15 minutes ago. Marshall could do nothing but stare. It was a good thing his hood had been pulled so low over his face, because if it wasn't, Ignitus would have seen the look on his face and would have probably left again. Marshall had never seen him this on edge. Once again he sat down in the chair next to him, and this time his leg was bouncing a mile a minute. He was unconsciously picking at the arm of the chair, but not once did his stare leave his parents. "Dude, mm? Unclench your jaw before you break your teeth. Also, what is wrong?" "I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't calm down, man. Marcy said I was having a panic attack in the truck earlier, and, Ig, before you have another one right now, I need you to stop and take a couple of deep breaths, okay?" Marshall asked, unable to hide the concern in his voice. "I want nothing to do with my parents." "So that's what's going on. What happened with them that you're like this right now?" Marshall asked seriously. Ig hadn't so much as looked away from his father since he'd returned. "He tried to kill me, and she did nothing but watch." Hearing this, Marshall felt his jaw drop. Pulling his sunglasses off, he leaned forward to look at Ignitus, who quickly angled himself away. The second Marshall's hand touched his shoulder, he flinched, and realization hit him like a truck. The reason his actions were so familiar was because he was acting like Fiona did when her PTSD was triggered. "Holy shit, dude, that must have given you PTSD or something, because you're triggered right now," Marshall said seriously. "I'm not kidding. This is what happens to Fiona. We need to get you out of here." "Iggy, come take pictures with us," Ember said, waving him over as she pulled Marceline along, their parents and the Wrights leading the way. Now Marshall was staring at him. "You absolutely do not have to take pictures right now, Ig." "You know I have to, Marshall. At least one." Ignitus said, pushing himself up from the seat. Taking a breath, he shoved his hands into his pockets, heading towards the dock. "I can do this. I can do this. Right?" Ember and Finn stood in the middle. The Wrights stood on Finn's side and his parents on Ember's. There was no way in hell he could do this. They wanted him to stand right next to his dad. He remained rooted to the spot and wasn't even sure he could move if he wanted to. He hated this. His heart was going to pound its way out of his chest, and his stomach pains were back. His only out right now was that Fiona wasn't here. Jake stood off to the side with him as they waited for her. Fiona ran towards the dock. Marshall had caught her attention before she made her way down, and what he'd said had beyond all reason worried her. Casting Ignitus a quick glance on her way by, Fiona could see that he wasn't looking so great. To everyone's surprise, Fiona hugged Ember tightly. "Sorry for running late. I forgot my phone on the table, and I want pictures too," she said loudly. Now, though, as she leaned close and hugged her again, Fiona whispered into Ember's ear. "Something's wrong with Ig. Look at him," she said, pulling back. Ember gave her a look, watching as Fiona returned it, stepping away and talking to her parents. Now she looked at her brother and felt a stab of pain in her chest. How had she missed this? He was off the charts anxious, trying so hard not to be noticed. She could tell by how he stared at the ground with his hands in his pockets. He'd done that since they were kids. You know what? I think family side only photos are so traditional. Ember said now looking at both their families. Why not a mix? Why not a mixed family photo? We're going to become a family, so who cares who stands where? And Marcy, why are you not over here to be in the picture with Iggy? She said, looking at Marceline. You're Iggy's wife and my sister-in-law. I want you in my photo. Where's Marshall? Now she walked down the dock towards the grass, cupping her hands around her mouth. Marshall! Ember began directing people around the small dock. By the time Marshall had arrived, she placed everyone where she wanted them. The end result was Ignitus being as far from her parents as she could get him while keeping him close to her in the photo. She'd even made Lady get in the photo and had Jake Jr. take charge of the camera for the group shot. The group dispersed, and as Ignitus walked by, Ember grabbed his hand, holding him back with her. Iggy, can I get a picture with just us? She asked, watching as he smiled at her. Yeah, of course, he said, handing his phone to Marshall, Ember doing the same. The pictures were taken, and after getting their phones back, Ember grabbed his hand, keeping him back again. Iggy, what's wrong? She asked, giving him a searching look. Ember didn't like how she'd so easily overlooked him earlier, how she thought he was okay. She'd been so happy that she hadn't noticed he was hurting, and he was. She could feel it. He was quiet for the longest time until finally he spoke. I don't want to talk about it now, Emma. Today's your day, he said pleadingly. Ember gave him a long look before biting her lip and nodding. This, he knew, was a huge concession for her. We'll talk tomorrow morning. We'll talk tomorrow morning, if not tonight, she said sternly. For the love of God, Emma, we'll talk tomorrow, I promise. Good, you know you can tell me everything. I know. I'll tell you everything that happened, just not right now. I want today to be about you. With a nod, Ember leaned forward, giving him a kiss on the cheek. I love you to death, Iggy. I love you too. The second Ember stepped away, Marceline appeared right by his side. To his relief, Ember was leading their parents back up to the pavilion, to where the girls were sizzling away with cookie meats. Marshall and Fiona were standing at the end of the dock, and the moment they stepped onto the grass, Fiona stepped forward, hugging him tightly. Nidus was frustrated at how ridiculously childish she felt as he hugged her back. Why the hell did he want to cry right now? What was wrong with him? What happened? Fiona asked. The silence stretched on the bank of the pond, and Marceline was the first to respond. Finn called Ig's phone about a month back needing help. He went to their parents' house to ask permission to marry Ember. It ended up with Finn being shot at by that psycho until we showed up, Marceline said, pointing towards his dad. Then he... She didn't even want to say it. It hurt too much. Also, what would it do to ignite us to hear it again? Shaking her head, she shaped her hand like a gun. She held it under her jaw, flicking her thumb twice, watching the identical looks of horror on their faces. Hearing and seeing what she'd said happened, Fiona squeezed Ignitus tighter. He pulled the trigger twice, Marceline mouthed, feeling her eyes burn. Walking over, she hugged him from behind. Iggy sandwich, Fiona said with a soft laugh. You okay? Marceline asked, rubbing her hand on the back of his neck. Releasing Fiona, he turned, wrapping his arms around Marceline, burying his face into her neck, holding her tightly. Let's give them some time, Fiona, Marshall said softly as he took her hand, leading her back to the pavilion, Marceline watching them walk away. She just stood there, holding him as tightly as he held her. She had no plans of moving. She'd stay right here for as long as he needed her to. This is jacked up, Marshall, Fiona said, fuming as they walked back up the hill. I want to smack the ever-loving crap out of that bastard. Well, you did learn that that's a bad idea, right? Marshall asked, giving Fiona a look. Yes, she groaned, scowling and rubbing her sore knuckles. Good. We'll keep an eye out on things. We're definitely going to talk to Finn about this, but for now we need to keep those two apart. He's not okay, and he's forcing himself to stay for Ember, Marshall said, grabbing her hand, pausing before they could be overheard by anyone else. I want you to talk to your parents. Your parents have known FP longer than they've known you. You know how your mom is about her kids, Marshall said as Fiona nodded her head. Through the years her parents had lived there, her mom had come to be known as the neighborhood mom. Even before having adopted Fiona, she was fiercely protective over the kids in the neighborhood she'd come to know, and Fiona knew for sure her parents, and most definitely her mom, wouldn't let anything happen to Ignitus. I'll talk to them now. she said, giving Marshall's hand a squeeze before letting his fingers slip from hers. Marshall watched as she walked over to what he deemed was the parents' table. There sat the twins' parents and the Wrights. Jake, Lady, and their kids took up the whole middle table to themselves, leaving the last remaining table for Finn and Ember, Marshall and Fiona, and Marceline and Ignitus. Seeing this, he headed over. He wanted to be the one to talk to Finn. Can I talk to you really quick? Fiona asked, taking Arya, who reached for her from her father's arms. Did you have fun with Grampy? She asked the baby in a playful voice, watching as her dad cringed. Fiona, that makes me sound so old. Fiona said nothing, but smirked at her father, who scowled at her good-naturedly. You're a brat, but you're my brat, Fiona, so I'll forgive you, Steve said with a chuckle as he shook his head. Ellen, take her away. Fiona, hearing this, laughed. Her mom stood, and together they walked from the table, strolling through the field. Marshall, what's wrong with Iggy? Ember asked the moment he approached the table. I'm working on it, he said, now looking at Finn. The man of the hour, how'd you come up with this? Come talk with me real quick. I want to bounce some ideas off you about something, he said, motioning Finn along as he led him into the deep shade of the trees. I take it this is more about what happened with Ignitus than my proposal technique, Finn said as they came to a pause at the edge of the forest. Dude, what the hell happened with them? Some of the craziest bullshit I've ever experienced in my life, Finn said as he shook his head, casting a look back to the table where Ember was now watching them. We're both going to laugh right now because Ember has that look on her face. Finn said, laughing loudly, Marshall following suit. Ember smiled and looked away from them. Problem averted, for now. Now he looked back at Marshall. Okay, for real, I had zero idea he'd react like this to our dad being here. He was fine before. Yeah, because their dad hadn't tried shooting him at that point, Marshall snapped in a hushed voice. Wait, he pulled the trigger? Marshall knew immediately by the tone of his voice, the look of utter shock on his face, that this was something Finn hadn't known. I wouldn't have brought either of them here if I knew that. Shit. Ember is gonna kill me, Finn said, running his fingers through his hair. Marshall, I swear I didn't know that. I saw Aiden point the gun at Egg. I saw him jam it right under his jaw when I was climbing into the car, and by the time I was inside the car, looking out the window to see what was going on, Marceline was freaking out, pulling Egg off him. The dude went ham. I thought he just finally got tired of his shit and laid him out. Damn. Why didn't you tell him? He said not to because he didn't want to hurt her like that. You do realize this is only going to hurt her more, but now Em's going to be triple pissed because 1, you knew something happened to her brother, 2, you hid it from her, and 3, she'll count that as a form of betrayal because she had found out about it way far after the fact and not because you wanted to tell her. I realize that, Finn said, now looking up at the sky as if all the answers for his problems would come raining down upon him if he waited long enough. She already asked him what's going on. You've got probably until midnight to figure out something to say to her before that bomb drops, Marshall said seriously. This he knew was going to be an explosion, the likes they'd never seen before. Looking over, he spotted Marceline and Ignitus walking back up the hill. Look, we keep this simple. I've got Fee talking to your mom. I have no idea what he's telling her, but my hope is that she can run interference on their dad. We keep them apart. That's the plan, plain and simple. That's no problem. I need to talk to Em now about this, Finn said, walking away from Marshall. He was right. Ember was going to be furious, and the best thing to do was to be upfront and blatantly honest before it was too late. He didn't need to go into detail, but he did need to tell her the truth. Marshall arrived at the table the same time Finn and Ember were leaving, and Ignitus and Marcy were arriving. You stay here. I'll grab us some food, Marceline said gently, pushing Ignitus towards the bench of the picnic table. I'll be right back. With a kiss to his head, Marceline walked across the pavilion. Marshall dropped into the seat next to him. You doing okay? He asked quietly, following his line of sight to the parents' table where Ignitus' parents sat. Been better. I can't wait to go home. Let Marcy drive you guys back, for real. This can be really draining, Ignitus nodded and smiled as Marceline put a plate down in front of him. Handing him silverware, she sat down next to him on his other side. Knock, knock. Ignitus looked over at Marshall, now looking confused. Who's there? To? To who? To whom? Marshall watched Ignitus's face change as he finally cracked a grin. Get the hell away from me, Marshall, for the love of Pete, he said with a laugh, jabbing him with his elbow. Is Pete someone I should know about, Egg? Because I'm supposed to be your one and only best friend, Marshall said with a grin. So basically, the last time they talked, there was a huge issue between them, and he doesn't feel comfortable being around his father? Ellen asked as Fiona nodded. That had been a perfect assessment of the situation, given she'd told her mother the bare minimum. Everything else was Ignitus's to tell. It wasn't for Fiona to say. He kept her secrets. Without question, she'd do the same for him. Exactly. If he's feeling the way I think he does, then he's probably feeling so helpless, and I understand that, Fiona said softly, crouching and allowing Ori to grab a bright yellow dandelion. Picking a poofy white one of her own, she brought it to her lips, gently blowing on it, sending the little puffs of white soaring through the air. The screech of excitement from Ori was enough to make them both laugh. We won't let anything happen, Fiona, I promise. I'll go let your father know right now, Ellen said, walking off to Fiona's surprise. Holy crap, she's going to tell him right at the table? Bad plan. This was a bad plan. Ma? Fiona hurried after her mom as she began speaking with her dad. Fiona stared in confusion at their conversation. Honey, do you know where my sunglasses are? Honey, do you know where my sunglasses are? Which ones, pink or blue? Blue with the red. Steve nodded. I saw them earlier. I'll keep an eye out. Okay, I think I did that wrong. Fiona watched as she gave his shoulder a squeeze, and with a smile, she turned and walked away. So, Aiden, what do you do for work? Steve asked as Fiona, Ellen, and Arya continued their walk, Ellen leading Fiona and the baby around the pavilion to avoid being overheard. I thought you were going to talk to Dad, Fiona said, now more than confused. I did. I told him to watch the boy with the red hair. There was a father problem, Ellen said as they continued on. I don't understand. You were talking about sunglasses. Fiona, working in social work, sometimes there are situations where it's extremely dangerous for both us and any child we're working with to speak openly. Your dad and I developed a kind of code from years of working together. I asked him about my sunglasses. Have you ever seen me wear sunglasses? Now that Fiona thought about it, she hadn't. They were something she didn't even think her mother owned. Fiona shook her head as her mother continued. We use sunglasses as a code for pay attention to or focus on. Steve asked me pink or blue. For boy or girl, Fiona said, catching on. Exactly. The second color is an identifier, so you know specifically who I'm talking about. He said he saw them earlier. Does that mean he saw something? That's exactly what it means. The shoulder touch always comes from the side that the particular parent of concern is on. He was sitting to Steve's left, so I touched his left shoulder. Come, I'll make you and Marshall a plate so you can eat, Ellen said, leading the way. That is so smart. Finn and Ember. Finn, where are we going? Ember asked as they walked down towards the forest. I need to talk to you about something away from everyone else. Hearing this, she looked at him in concern. What's wrong? I want to start off with an apology and an explanation, Finn said, watching as she raised an eyebrow. Okay, what are you apologizing for? I know what's bothering your brother, Finn said, watching her eyes widen. What? Tell me. I'm sorry, but I can't. He asked me not to tell you. Crossing arms, Ember cocked her hips, staring him down, her eyes narrowing. Oh crap, it was the look. Not just her look, but the look. He was doomed. Well, you aren't planning on marrying my brother. I'm the one you need to be honest with. I can tell you the general gist of what happened, but I didn't actually see what had happened. Well, tell me, she said, staring him down, her arms across her chest. I went to your parents' house. I went to your parents' house to ask your father's permission to marry me. Your dad flipped the hell out. He was completely trashed. He was completely trashed and chased me around the yard, threatening to kill me. He had a gun and he shot at me quite a few times. I tried calling you, but I dialed Ig by accident, and he came down to grab me. Some things happened, and Ig and your dad got into it huge. I didn't realize how far it had gone between them until I saw him today. I genuinely swear that I didn't know, Finn said, shaking his head. But the one thing I know for certain is that you love him more than you love them. I just wanted everyone you love to be here today, but had I known things had gone that badly, I never would have invited them. Ember stood in silence, staring at Finn. The story sounded more than familiar, and closing her eyes, she tried recalling where she'd heard it. Suddenly the memory of Squish Night returned full force. Mm. Flashback. Since when do you stick up for my boyfriends? When they're willing to risk life and limb and be shot at just to get a blessing from our shitty dad, he said, watching as her head tilted up to look at him. He wasn't kidding when he asked if I'd ever want to marry him? She asked, watching as her brother shook his head. Nope, I had to go get him from their place the other day. And flashback. Now she looked over her shoulder back at the pavilion. He's been forcing himself to stay here for me, hasn't he? Emperor asked sadly. He's staying because he loves you and he wants to be here to spend time with you on your special day, Finn said, taking her hand and squeezing gently. Thank you for telling me the truth, she said quietly, now turning from Finn. Releasing his hand, she walked back up towards the pavilion alone. Emperor wasn't sure what she was going to do. She knew what she wanted to do, and that was to just completely flip her lid out on her father. That would definitely spoil the day, and it's not what her brother would want. The moment she stepped onto the cement floor, Ember walked towards their table, hugging her brother tightly from behind as he sat on the bench. She felt him flinch, but she'd never tell him that. What did he do to you? If you want to leave, Ember said softly, now resting her chin on his shoulder, I'm more than okay with that. I know something's going on between you and our parents, and if it'll make you feel better to leave, then go. You don't have to stay for me. You've already made my day, Icky. Are you sure? If you want me to stay, I'll stay, he said quietly, more than aware that the entire table was focusing on them. I'm more than sure, she said, now looking to Marceline. I want you to take him home, she said softly, giving her a sad smile, watching the look of relief on her face as Marceline nodded. We'll go soon, then, she said, watching Ember nod before releasing him. Grabbing a few things for herself, she sat down between Finn and Fiona, across from her brother. The group began talking about everything and anything that came to mind. Did Finn and Ember have a thought for a wedding date? Did Ember have any ideas for a color scheme? How did Finn come up with such a great place to propose? Did they ever want kids? They got lost in the conversation, and Ember was more than happy to see her brother relax more. Ignitus and Marceline. A good bit of time passed, and finally, when their plates were clear, Marceline grabbing Ignitus's for him as she tossed them in the trash. It was time to go, and he was never more relieved. The whole table seemed to understand without them even announcing it, as everyone began making their goodbyes. Hugs to Ember and Fiona, waves to Lady Jake and their kids, and the Wrights who sat alone at the table, nods to Marshall and Finn, and raspberry kisses for Ari on her cheeks, because how could he not when she laughed like that? Arya was passed to Marceline, who immediately began tickling her goddaughter, covering her in kisses. Seeing her with a baby brought his thoughts back to his conversation with Marshall. Ignitus wondered again if children were something Marceline wanted. I can't wait to have one of my own, but right now I'm fine with my low-rented baby, Marceline said in a sing-song voice as she lifted Ari into the air. Almost immediately, Ignitus smiled, feeling the warmth spread across his chest. She did want kids. That was freaking great. You really want kids? He asked, watching as Marceline smiled, passing Arya to Marshall. Of course, don't you think a little person that was half you and half me would be cute? She asked with a smile. Genuinely, though, I do want to wait because we haven't been together very long. I want us to build something strong and lasting and stable before we bring a baby into this world. I'm fine with waiting as long as you want. I'm just excited you want kids, too. I didn't know if that's something you wanted, Ignitus said, surprising Marceline, pulling her into a hug. I'm so happy it is. Wow, this is something you really wanted, isn't it? She asked, pulling back to look at him as he nodded. It is. It always has been. I mean, I'm nowhere near ready, not even close, but I do want them in the future. It's something I want too, but I want just us right now, Marceline said with a smile. Damn, she's perfect. I do too. Ready to go? Marceline asked as he slipped his hand into hers, in response squeezing tightly, feeling as she squeezed back, leading the way to the parking lot. Would you mind driving back? He asked as Marceline smiled at him. Of course Aiden Flint, absolutely not. In unison they turned, Marceline feeling the grip on her hand again tighten as he took a step back. His father was only feet away. His shoulder firmly in Ellen's grasp as she held him in place. If I want to talk to that disrespectful, Ignitus has made it more than clear, without even saying a word, how he feels about your presence around him. You don't need to be a social worker to see it, she said as he shrugged his shoulder from her grasp, trying to walk around her. As for disrespect, the only disrespectful person here is you, for wanting to violate the very clear boundaries he set. The anger in her voice now was more than obvious. Marceline was impressed. Ellen was in full mother bear mode. This, though, didn't seem to sway the man before them. With a scoff, he stepped towards them, and at the sharp, panicked breath beside her, Marceline released Ignitus's hand. Taking 2 steps forward, she planted the heel of her palm into his father's chest, stopping him dead in his tracks. He stumbled several steps back with her sheer force, as Marceline continued forward, pushing him back. I don't care what it is you have to say. The answer is no. There's not a single person here outside of you and your wife that would want to see him hurt in any way, you monster. Marceline's voice was choked with anger, and she bristled with rage as she stared him down, refusing to give an inch. As she stared into those familiar eyes, Marceline couldn't help but wonder how a warm and loving husband had come from a man so callous and cold. He wouldn't be getting any closer to Ignitus. She refused to allow that. Marceline felt something brush her back, and a gentle touch on her shoulder as Ember slipped in front of her. She stepped right up to her father's face, practically nose to nose, with the man startling him as he took several more steps back. Still feeling the presence at her back, Marceline glanced behind her and swallowed back her tears, feeling a massive rush of gratitude for their friends. They were all standing behind her, standing for him, literally. Marshall, Finn, Jake, and Steve all stood directly behind her, forming a barrier, and behind them were Fiona, Lady, and Ellen, all now standing around Ignitus, Ellen talking to him. Thank you, Mom Bear. The moment he'd heard Ellen's voice so angry and so close behind them, Ignitus swore he felt his heart drop in his chest. His first thought was that his father would hurt her, and immediately it felt as if all the air from his lungs vanished. His heart was pounding loudly in his ears, and it was all he could hear. The look in his eye when he stepped past her, though, had been the same as it had that day. The feeling of panic crashed over him like a bucket of ice water, and had him reeling as his father approached. He wanted to run, he wanted to throw up, but mostly he wanted to breathe. When Marceline's hand slipped from his, a touch on his shoulder made him gasp as he jumped in shock. Turning, he saw Fiona, her hand resting on his shoulder. We're not going to let a single thing happen to you, Ig. It's going to be okay, Fiona said, squeezing his shoulder. This doesn't fly in our family, Lady said, now standing in front of them, looking back at him. No, it doesn't. Are you okay, sweetheart? Ellen asked. What do you need right now? I just want to go. Marcy? Ellen said, looking over as she approached. The second she was within reach, Marceline pulled her into a tight, quick hug. Thank you, Ma. No problem, sweetie, but you guys should leave. He doesn't need this. Marceline nodded in agreement, her hand sliding into his, now tugging him along. She didn't want to be here anymore. She didn't want Ignitus to go through any more of this either. This had become an unmitigated disaster. Resting her hand on his back, Marceline walked them towards the parking lot. Taking a last glance back, she stared in shock, watching as Ember slapped her father right across the face. Now Marceline kicked her walking speed into overdrive, hurrying to the truck. Opening the door for him, Marceline started the truck and took off the moment his door was shut. She felt relief the moment they hit the main road out of the forest towards the highway. Are you okay? She asked, looking over at him. Ig? Yeah. She didn't believe him for a second. The drive back to the hotel was a quick one, and walking him to the elevator, Marceline paused. Stay here, I'll be right back. She walked down the hall, leaving Ignitus by himself to wait. He didn't want to be by himself. It was so much harder to ignore all the thoughts, all those memories. Everything always came back so vividly when he was alone. Closing his eyes, Ignitus flinched at the sound of a door slamming at the end of the hall, and took a breath. He'd just stay here and breathe until Marceline got back. That would be fine. Just focused breathing. In, he could hear footsteps. Out, definitely footsteps. In, the achingly familiar smell of stale alcohol. Out. He opened his eyes and he was outside his parents' house again, looking into his father's eyes, feeling the hot metal of the gun as it jammed under his jaw. His eyes squeezed tightly shut. All he could do was wait to die. Click. Egg? Click. A hand touched his shoulder, and he stumbled back, pushing it away. Just get away from me, he gasped, his eyes snapping open as he blinked, his hand touching his neck, feeling for a gun that had never been there. His eyes closed again, still seeing his father in front of him. Iggy, can you hear me? Marceline asked, now genuinely afraid to touch him. She didn't want to make this worse. Marcy? Love, you're having a flashback, I think. I'm gonna touch your hand, okay? She asked, watching as he nodded, her hand gently resting on his, squeezing it. Open your eyes and look at me. She watched as his eyes slowly opened. The more he blinked, the more clear his surroundings became. The walls of the hotel hallway registering as he looked around. Marceline was on her knees in front of him, holding his hand tightly in hers. The elevator dinged and Marceline looked up. Let's go upstairs, Egg, Marceline said, squeezing his hand, watching as he nodded. Carefully, he pushed himself up from the floor. The elevator ride was quiet, and the moment they entered the suite, Marceline kicked her shoes off, walking him straight to the bedroom. She sat him on the edge of the bed, tugging his shoes off and pulling his shirt over his head. Reaching down, she grabbed a pair of pajama pants from his bag, handing them to him. Stripping her own clothes off, she reached for the shirt she'd been using on the bed, pulling it over her head. Marceline felt a gentle touch on her waist, and turning, she stepped forward, embracing him. Ignitus's arms wrapped around her waist, his face burrowing into her stomach as she cradled his head. Marceline wasn't sure what to do. She just knew he needed her. She could feel as his body began shaking, his hold on her tightening as she took trembling breaths. Marceline ran her fingers through his hair, and at the sound of his sniffle, her heart ached. It's okay to be sad about what happened with your parents, Iggy. It was something that was painful and scary, and today it must have been so stressful for you. It's okay to be sad. It will give you a moment to catch your breath, Marceline whispered to him, feeling as he shook. Ignitus's sharp intake of breath was all it took to break her heart. Marceline held him as tightly as she could, as he let out a sob, breaking down in her arms. Oh my gosh. Okay. That was a lot. This book is nuts. I love it so much. Um, so it's almost 9 o'clock. I think I'm gonna have to record a fourth chapter tomorrow. And also I have a movie tomorrow, so I may or may not upload a video depending on like how I'm feeling and if I'm gonna like if I can do it or not. If I have the time and also if I feel like I mentally want to do it. But anyway, I just want to say um I am hoping that I'm gonna be able to upload the next chapter of The Girl in the Bunny Hat in the next couple of weeks. I'm trying to work on my writing a little bit more. It's going slowly, and I definitely took a lot of influence from this book, but I'm not gonna have the Lich in my book. There's no like villain. I mean, I didn't think there was a villain in this book, and yeah, it is mostly like life stuff, but the author did put the Lich in there, which I think was a really interesting choice, and I think it's like I don't know, I'm enjoying this book like a lot. It's my favorite fan fiction that I've read so far, but I love it, and I just want to say that there's no Lich in my book, and it's just like life basically. I mean, this book is mostly life stuff too, but anyway. Um so I'm gonna go and I'll be back with another chapter soon. And if I don't record another chapter tomorrow, then I guess I'll just record another chapter the next day. Anyway, bye. Hey guys. So this seems like a short chapter, first of all. I'm like waiting very nervously for the lich to pop back up because you know he's coming, but we've had a few chapters where it's just quiet. Well, for the most part, except for the house was being bugged and stuff. Also, I have some very exciting news. I finally found a way to watch the adventures of Fiona and Cake, you know, that like spin-off or whatever of Adventure Time. Everyone's talking about it and like it's hard to avoid because I don't want spoilers for it because I haven't seen it yet because I don't have a way to watch it. You guys all in the States are lucky. So like when I first heard about it, it was on HBO Max, and then I didn't have HBO Max because I don't live in the States. So I've been like searching for a way to watch it, and it took me months, but finally I found a way to watch it. I was searching for it on like all my accounts because I have like 3 or 4 accounts. My big ones are Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and there's the Netflix, although my mom pays for the Netflix. But anyway, I found on Amazon Prime that I can watch it with a subscription to Stack TV, but also it's free for 30 days, so. And it's not the only thing I'm going to be watching either. It's the first thing I'm going to be watching. I literally just found this last night. But anyway, I'm really excited. There's more stuff I can watch. They have Adventure Time, which I own all the episodes on DVD, so I don't really need Stack TV to watch it, but it has regular show. There are a few episodes missing from season 1, but other than that, it's pretty good. They have basically all of it. There's Rick and Morty. God knows I'm gonna be catching up on that, so I have like priorities. I've already seen regular show. I've already seen Adventure Time, and I own all of it on DVD. I think they also have The Amazing World of Gumball. I have to double check on that, but my priorities are Fiona and Cake first, and then I'm gonna watch Rick and Morty. I'm gonna catch up on like all the episodes of Rick and Morty. And some people say it's getting bad, but I will be my own judge of my own opinion on Rick and Morty. So I'm gonna like catch up on all of Rick and Morty. So, after this, I'm probably gonna be taking a few days off just to watch Stack TV for a little bit. I'm gonna do this last chapter, and then while it's uploading or editing or processing or exporting or whatever you want to call it, I'm gonna be watching Fiona and Cake, and I'm really excited about it because not only am I really excited to see it, but it's also probably gonna provide me some very important context for my fanfiction that I've been writing. You know, the girl in the bunny hat that I uploaded the epilogue in chapter 1 of like forever ago, and then I haven't uploaded since. But I am planning to finish chapter 2 in the next couple weeks. Hopefully by the end of this week, but I'm not 100% sure if that will happen, especially since I'm taking a few days off just to watch TV because I really want to catch up on stuff. But I don't want to go past the 30-day trial period because then I'm gonna have to pay, and I'm already having. And the reason I like cut back my accounts after COVID is because during COVID, Passport was paying for everything. Although they're still covering technology up to like I think $3,000, so I could probably just keep my Stack TV till Passport resets, and then I could send all the. You know what? I might do that because January, February, March. Okay, if I keep my Stack TV account, I can have it for a couple more months. Anyway, I think it's going to provide some really important context for the girl in the bunny hat, which I think would be really cool. I mean, we got to know a little bit of these characters, but like hardly at all. They had like a few centric episodes, but um, especially Fiona was the main character of those centric episodes, so we got so much of her. We got so much of her in like every single one, but we didn't really get to see much of Marshall Lee or FP or any of the other characters because I think they each had their own individual episode with her. Like Prince Gumball got his own individual episode with her, and Flame Prince, which by the way, his real name is Evan Alexander Flame, so I now know what his name will be in the book. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and read the chapter now because it's been almost 5 minutes and I'm just talking. And honestly, all this stuff could go in a vlog, but I just wanted to let you guys know I found a way to watch Fiona and Cake. So next time you guys see me, I think I might take as long as a week off, so I'm giving you guys a 4 chapter upload, and then I'm just taking some time off. And honestly, I think it's a good idea too, considering we still have no idea when the contractor is coming in, and that's causing a little bit of anxiety. A lot of my anxiety definitely dispersed since this situation with the pipes and the leak is completely dealt with. And also, you know, Jason's my friend, it's his business, so obviously I want the shop to be back up and running so he can make money again because he's basically not been working, I don't think, since, I mean, they had a leak in the shop. I'm not sure how he could possibly be working. Anyway, I'm gonna go and read the chapter. It's difficult to run an empire. It's even more so when division begins setting in. Oh, wait, no, chapter 104, lines drawn. It's difficult to run an empire. It's even more so when division begins setting in and priorities no longer align. It's so difficult to find good help nowadays. Loyal, hard workers with a hive mind. The intercom pinged, and looking up from his work, Anderson lifted the receiver to his ear. There he is. I've told you twice this week now not to interrupt me between 8 and 9. I'm so sorry, Mr. Lich, sir, but I have Marshal Abigail on the line. And tell him that I'm unavailable between the hours of 8 and 9. After that, call May and tell her she will be immediately working 9 to 5 starting today. and reinstate our evening secretary through the internship program. When you're finished with those tasks, clear out your desk," he said, hanging up the phone. Oof. So hard to find good help nowadays. Looking at the books, Litch adjusted his glasses as he went through the numbers on the sheets in front of him. Things weren't adding up. Profits were in decline, and there had been excessive expenses outside of the budget posted in security. This was to be expected, but not to this degree. Thousands of dollars wasted, nothing to show for any of it. Shaking his head, Litch closed the folder, placing it inside the top drawer. Standing, he shrugged on his jacket and slicked back his hair, adjusting his tie in the reflection on the glass. He gazed out over the city, watching as the people below crawled along like ants, each one insignificant, their lives trivial and fleeting. What the hell? Okay, a knock came on the door. A knock came to the door of his office, and as he turned, the door opened. May walked in, carrying a tray in one arm and several folders in the other. "Mr. Litch, I took the liberty of moving your 9 o'clock until tomorrow. Your 10:30 has been moved to 10, she said, now handing him a teacup and saucer from the tray. Quickly, without spilling a drop, she filled the cup, not even sparing it a glance as she read the schedule. "Your black tea at exactly 201 degrees Fahrenheit. We have your schedule prepared to be posted if this directive meets with your approval. You have 2 messages. It's currently 9:03, by the way." "Thank you, May. I'll take my messages," Litch said, sitting at his desk, watching as the young woman opened a folder, pulling out a sheet of paper. "The first is from Marshall Abadir. He requests a meeting with you and the Scream Kings on their future dealings within the company." "And the second?" "Declan Cromwell. I guess that's who DC is." "I see. Schedule a time for the Scream Kings before the week is out. Also, schedule a reminder, too, if time constraints allow." "Yes, Mr. Litch? Is there an intended recipient?" May asked, looking at the man before her as he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Fiona. Remind her what she has to lose if they cross me. She needs to question this choice." Hearing this, she nodded. "Understood. I'll tell them to be thorough and convincing. And the second reminder, I like the thought of far-reaching consequences. Whatever's done, have it involve the child both times. Jesus Christ." "Mr. Litch, with the sensitivity of the situation, with an infant being involved—" "Are you questioning me?" "Never. I was going to ask if you thought Declan's men would be up to the task." "Were you offering yourself as an alternative?" "As a matter of fact, Mr. Litch, I was. If I may speak freely." "Interesting. You may." She watched as he waved his hand, motioning her on. "Ever since Declan was hired on as head of security, it's true we've seen our profit margins rising in some areas. However, he and his men are sloppy. They get the job done. Yes, however, they're predictable," she said, now staring down her boss. "They don't stalk their prey. They run head first in, blow their cover, and give the whole plan away. You're in need of more elegance than a smash and grab." "You have 72 hours. I must say, May, you are a revelation. Pray tell, what is it you've gotten yourself mixed up in before coming to my organization?" he asked, watching as she smiled, walking towards the door. "Let's just say I know how to knock 'em dead. I'll be back with your afternoon report, Mr. Litch," May said as she walked from the room with her tray. This, she knew, wouldn't be an easy task. It was one that required poise and finesse. She made note to check the cameras and recording systems that had been placed around the Abadir house. New mothers don't leave their babies alone for very long, and she needed to find an opening. Logging onto the security network, she flipped through the feeds, finding them strangely silent. This was not good. Flipping through, she found one still live, immediately clicking on it. The screen lit up and the view made her grin. However, they'd found the other bugs and cameras. They missed this one in the baby's room. From this angle, she could see everything. The crib in the corner, the window on the opposite wall with the rocking chair. The closet door was straight ahead, and she watched as Fiona entered the room, opening it, pulling out baby clothes. From the looks of things, she was talking to someone. The lack of sound was annoying her, and going through the auditory feed, she activated it, plugging in her headphones. Immediately, the voice off screen began speaking, and it was one she didn't recognize. "That's what I'm saying. I swear M's the worst of the two temper-wise. You can get over physical injury. You always heal. But damn, she just goes straight for emotional wounds, like a mind ninja or a mental terrorist." "Come on, Finn. What did you expect would happen?" "It was my first attempt, so I was hoping for a damn break." "Ember doesn't do breaks. Not when it comes to dinner like that. Look, who would think that there'd be a neck and things inside the damn chicken?" "Literally everyone, Finn." This was getting boring. Setting the feeds to a live stream recording, she pinned it to the top of her screen as she went through the morning work. Afternoon confirmations were done. Weekly pay stubs from the most recent week were being processed, and 2 charity drives were confirmed and waiting on Litch's final approval. First priority now was to schedule that meeting with the Scream Kings. Picking through the file, she found Marshall's number, dialing it in. She could hear the ringing through the live feed. Hello? Hello, Marshall. It's May from Bloodwing giving you a call back to schedule that meeting you requested. Morning passed quickly, and with the afternoon report in hand, May walked into Litch's office once again. The afternoon report is in. I checked the stocks and we're rising, especially since we've dropped the newest Scream Kings album. We've finally returned to equal levels pre-tour cancellation. Taking his cup, she swapped it out with another, filling it, this time leaving the teapot on his desk, along with the small charcuterie board covered with crackers, meats, and cheeses. PR was able to swing it to make it sound as if the cancellation was for Marshall's health. All tickets have either been refunded or redistributed with the new shows and date and time, and one of our charity functions will make a donation to the National XP Foundation based on ticket price. Because of our involvement with this fountain, we've had a 16% jump in sales. Excellent. Has a meeting time been scheduled for Marshall and his band? Yes, I called Marshall first thing. Your Thursday was wide open, so I booked an evening appointment. It'll be at 5 p.m. It'll be at 5 o'clock p.m. in the large conference room. Your last meeting of the evening. Thank you. When will the evening secretary arrive? 4 p.m. I wanted them here an hour beforehand for training competency reasons. I appreciate that. Once you've completed their training, take the day, Litch said, now looking towards the figures and spreadsheets on his desk. Yes, Mr. Litch, is there any correspondence you'd like me to deliver? It will be ready before you leave. See me before you go. What time are you taking lunch? 1 o'clock, so now. Were there any errands you needed me to run? None. Can you prepare the files for my meeting while you're away? Already done. Have a good lunch. There are places in the city that good people don't go. The dirty underbelly that only the lowest of the low crawl, teeming with filth and decay. This had to have been where Litch had found Declan, May had decided. It was where he'd found her, saved her. She owed him her life. The sound of her shoes clacking down the alleyway echoed as she walked. Turning a corner, she paused, now banging on a metal door, so tagged with graffiti it blended perfectly into the wall. Had she not once lived here, she'd have walked right past it. The sound of metal scraping met her ears, and a pair of eyes met hers through the view latch. Didn't think I'd see you again. I thought you were thrown from the guild after that botched hit on the senator. I made up for it. And she had too. She'd almost paid with her life. Had it not been for Litch, she would have. Let me in. I need to get some stuff. The eyes vanished as the slide slid shut. The door opened moments after, and May released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. So she was still in the guild after all. Welcome back, Nimao. Everything had been as she remembered it being. Living quarters down the right, training room straight ahead, but what she needed was in the basement. Nobody in the Guild of Assassins cared if you used anything, as long as it was returned and the job was done. Making a quick stop in the apothecary storage room for some rose hips, she grinned. Just a few of the small bulbs would be more than enough to cause misery. What she'd really come for, though, were the trail cameras. Sure, she'd have more to do in-person monitoring. She'd have to do more in-person monitoring, but whatever they did had knocked out almost all of their cameras, and they needed an edge right now. Digging through the box, she found 3 that would be perfect. They might not collect sound, though. She had been hoping for the good ones, but someone else had beat her to them. Opening them, she found an SD card in each one, making a mental note to clear and charge them before she went out tonight. Checking the time, she slipped the cameras into her bag, heading back to Bloodrain. The gray walls looked as if they were painted red in the blood of the setting sun as she walked into the office. Litch, as per usual, was at his desk and looked up when she entered. The evening secretary has been caught up to date with all of her duties and has been trained. I'm getting ready to leave. Do you have the correspondence for the reminders? She asked, watching as Litch opened the drawer, pulling out one white envelope, handing it to her. Whatever is done to the child, this envelope is to be placed with her. It goes without saying that no major harm is to come to her. Yet. Yes, Mr. Litch, would that be all for this evening? That will, May, thank you. Taking the envelope and tucking it into her bag, May walked from the room without another word. In her car, she pulled out her phone, linking up to the live feed of the camera, plugging it into the audio of her car. The baby's room was dark and silent, but the faint sounds of people could be heard. They must be downstairs. Following directions on the map app, she passed by the house, making a mental note of it. Bushes were overgrown, and the shrubs made an excellent place to hide. Parking up the block, she quickly changed, pulling on a sweatsuit she'd pulled from her bag and slipping on sneakers. Rounding the block, she came up on the house from the other side. The yard was large and fenced in, and the bushes still wild. That would make everything more than easy. Slipping beneath the foliage, she crawled under, entering the yard and spotting the floodlights. Those she could see were new, and aimed at the back door. It was still light enough out that she could risk setting them off, and deciding to go for it, she crept over, climbing up onto the top step and reached for the bulbs. She unscrewed them just enough so they wouldn't turn on and give her away. Hearing voices, she crouched down again, watching as the light in the kitchen came shining through the window. She could hear footsteps and the sound of something being set down. "I'm going to clean out the back seat, Fee. Always in the car seat and ready," Marshall said, his voice coming from the open window, and as she braved a peek through the window of the back door, she could see him walking down the hall and out the front, shutting the door behind him. Trying the back door and finding it locked, she slipped her hand in her pocket, pulling out the old hotel room key card she kept especially for these situations, and jimmied the lock. She opened the door, popped her head inside, and listened. Immediately, she spotted the baby in her car seat who was staring at her. She could hear the sound of a blow dryer and knew that as long as that was on, she'd be covered sound-wise. Stepping inside as quietly as she could, May looked around, knowing she needed to work quickly. The kitchen had a small table, and grabbing the chairs, she set them up just apart from each other, making a bridge out of the broom and the mop leaning against the wall. Pushing down on the handles and feeling they were sturdy enough, she grabbed the handle of the car seat, pulling the baby close. "Sorry, kiddo. You're cute as all get out, but orders are orders." Unbuckling the car seat, she popped the snaps on the bottom of her onesie open, sliding the card underneath the shirt and fixing her onesie before buckling her back in and tightening the straps, locking her snugly in place. Loose straps wouldn't be good for what she had planned. Sliding the carrier arm down a few notches, she locked it into place as well, giving it a firm tug and seeing it hold. Flipping the entire car seat, baby and all, upside down, she balanced it on the bridge of the broom and mop handles between the chairs. May stepped back, looking impressed. It was holding better than she thought it would. Immediately, the whimpering cries began as she dangled over the floor. As May thought about maybe giving her a pinch to accelerate this process, the baby let out a shrieking cry loud enough to startle both she and Fiona. The sound of the hairdryer hitting the floor met her ears, and May knew she needed to run. Diving out the door, she closed it behind her, making sure she'd locked the handle. May had just slipped into the bushes when the sound of Fiona's scream met her ears. May could hear a new door opening and closing now, and knowing it would be Marshall, she crept around the front. Finding the door of the car open and the car abandoned, she decided to take her chance. Reaching into her pocket, she grabbed the tracking device, and running over, she made a small slit into the seam of the seat's cushion and slipped it inside. Crouching low, she kept close to the bush, the darkness masking her now. Sneaking over, she crept along the windows, peeking through as she did. From here, she could see into the living room perfectly, the shadows of the bushes and trees hiding her from view, while the lights lit up the inside of the house. Fiona was holding the baby, who continued to cry desperately, looking like she was a moment from losing it herself. Marshall was nowhere to be seen. To her shock, he appeared on the side of the house, walking quietly around. Watching as he passed by, May crouched low, just in time for the beam of the flashlight to pass over her head. After a moment, he walked off, and she watched as he entered the living room, now talking to Fiona. Looking around, May decided that for the trail cams, this was a perfect spot, and with a damn good view, too. Reaching over, she grabbed a branch, strapping the camera to it, angling it through the window. They walked from the living room into the kitchen, and May followed along, recalling spotting an open window in that direction. "Don't know, Fiona. I didn't see anything outside. I didn't see anyone at all. Hell, I had to unlock the back door to go out, so whoever did this couldn't have come in that way." "I don't care. Just figure it out." She sounded scared. That was exactly what Lich wanted. The baby continued crying, and she watched as Fiona passed her to Marshall, who immediately made a face. His fingers curiously touched the unusual firmness on his daughter's chest, before he began quickly working the straps of the onesie. The moment he slid the card out, they shared a look, Fiona's hands flying to her mouth. Immediately she took the baby back in her arms, holding her tightly as she cried. Marshall held them both, and taking this as her cue, May left to scope out more areas that could possibly be used for the trail cams. Knowing she had 2 cameras left, she angled one facing the kitchen and well out of view, and the last one she set up close to the front door. With this done, she headed out of the yard and down her street back to her car. Part 1 of the plan was complete. Part 2 called for an absolutely miserable baby, and if she had played her cards right, she'd be back tonight. Scytholicus is the cottony white inside of the rose hips. When cut open, removed from the hull, partially steamed to expand and loosen the fibers, dried again, and crushed, you get homemade itching powder. May looked at the plastic baggie in her hands of crushed Scytholicus. She'd been sitting here a half hour now, and according to the tracker in Marshall's car, they'd finally stopped. Checking the coordinates, she matched it with an address and housing records, and couldn't help but be intrigued. They were at Hunts Aberdeen's private residence. Interesting. Exiting the car, she once again headed towards the house, easily picking the back door lock, listening for signs of life. Hearing none, she entered the house quickly and quietly, clearing the first floor. Making her way upstairs, she cleared it and relaxed before hunting down some of the monitoring devices. Walking into the baby's room, she opened the drawers, flipping pajamas inside out and sprinkling pinches of powder inside, refolding them and putting them back in the drawers. Going through the clothes, she sprinkled, shaking it through, and putting each item back as she found it. She even sprinkled some in the clothes and jackets hanging up in the closet. She'd been working on the socks when the doorbell began ringing repeatedly. This made her pause, and sliding the drawer shut, she walked from the room as knocking joined the dinging of the bell. Marsh, Fiona? Anyone home? Hello? It was one of the boys in the band. May recognized his voice well enough to know that much. Maybe they're not home, sugar. We should have called first. Then we'll wait for them. This is important, what you found, he said. May could hear the sound of a key entering the lock and felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She was still on the landing of the stairs. Taking them by twos, she sprinted down and through the living room the same time the door opened. At the sound of the gasp, she knew she'd been seen. Hey, get back here! The chase was on. Sprinting through the kitchen, she ran out the back door again. There was no time for door tricks now. Ripping off her sweatshirt, she drove through the bushes, landing hard on the ground. Quickly she pulled her hair free, and flinging her dark sweatshirt under a nearby car, she let out a panicked scream. Let go! Somebody help! Help! Are you okay? May watched as the same man who'd been chasing her hurried around the corner, a young woman close behind. Oh my gosh, a man just came at me from the bushes and grabbed me. I was terrified, May said, burying her face in her hands. Which way did he go? Quickly she pointed towards the closest street corner and watched as he took off. Are you all right? Do you need me to call anyone for you? No, I was visiting my parents. If they find out what happened, they'll freak. I just want to go. My car's right over there. I'll stay right here to make sure you get to your car safely. Thank you. May hurried to her car, hopping in and breathing a sigh of relief. That had almost been bad. Turning over the ignition, she headed towards home. 9:01 on the dot, and Litch watched as the office door opened, and May walked in with the usual pot of tea and the morning report. Your 11:30 cancelled. There was one new message this morning. I took the liberty of making the return call first thing. You now have a meeting at 1 with Marshall. It was requested last night, she said, watching as his eyes met hers immediately. May gave nothing away as she continued her usual routine, placing the teacup down and again filling it to the brim with the scalding liquid, not missing a drop. I added this to your weekly schedule as well. I know that's the one you prefer to check. I suggest you take an extended early lunch before your meeting with Marshall. Push back my 9:30. I prefer my update now, he said, steepling his fingers, watching as she walked from the room for the briefest of moments before returning. Your 9:30 shows to reschedule whenever you're ready. Enlighten me. Going through the audio and video files we have for the Aberdeen house, of the 30 bugs and cameras that were placed, 23 have been found and removed. 6 are being incapacitated by an electrical interference device, and 1 remains active with both video and audio. The other 3 residences have shown up the same, though I've yet to canvass them. Radio silence from the Flint department suggests to me they no longer reside in the domicile. I'll have confirmation for you by tomorrow. Recovery of some of those 6 devices has been done in the Aberdeen house, which will save money for the company. I've already set up trail cameras outside at key points around the house. I'll be back nightly to swap out the SD cards and batteries. The reminder has been delivered, however, the letter was found by Marshall, not Fiona. That's fine. Tell me, what was done? He asked, now leaning forward. It was only halfway complete when I left last night, but by now it's in full swing. I made an all-natural itching powder and put it inside the baby's pajamas, socks, and a good chunk of her clothing. For the reminder, I decided to turn their world upside down. I strapped her in and hung her upside down in the car seat for them to find. She was safe. I tightened the straps probably more than needed, but it had the effect you wanted. Fiona's terrified right now. Also, I placed a tracker in Marshall's car. They went to Hudson Aberdeen's home last night. Interesting. I thought so as well. While finishing phase 2 of the plan, the backup singer and guitarist Modestus and his girlfriend showed up. They spotted me from behind. He gave chase. I drove through the bushes, altered my appearance, and acted like I had been accosted. I told him it was a man and sent him down the street while his girlfriend made sure I got to my car safely. They didn't suspect me in the slightest. Excellent. Anything else? Yes, she said with a smile, now offering him the tablet in her arms. Marshall will probably be quite frustrated during today's meeting. Potentially volatile. I'd suggest extra security in your office. Now she pressed the play button, turning it to max speed, and they watched. The time starting at 10 o'clock the prior evening, going straight through to 8 this morning. The whole time Marshall and Fiona passed off the crying child, going back and forth. Every time they managed to settle her, they'd had only a few minutes of silence before she'd started up again. Eventually Marshall waved Fiona from the room. Ultimately he ended up staying with her the rest of the night, rubbing her back to soothe her. Do we have live on this feed right now? Litch asked, not even sparing her a glance. Reaching over, May pressed the link and adjusted the volume as a miserable wailing came through. What is wrong, Mamas? What's wrong? Marshall asked desperately as he walked her around the room. That's it, Fiona, I'm giving her another bath. Marsh, that's the 4th bath since last night. It's gonna cause her problems. Look, she calms down after a bath. We just need her calm. We don't know if she's allergic to something in the soap or the lotion or the laundry detergent or if this isn't normal, Fiona. We don't know, but I'm gonna do what I have to do to calm my baby down. You don't have to yell at me. I'm not. Ugh, we're so not doing this now. I'm giving Ari another bath, Marshall said, now walking past Fiona and from the room. This is absolutely delightful. Taking your suggestion into consideration, I must say I agree. Have 2 of the security teams stationed in my office 15 minutes prior to our meeting. I'm sure this appointment with Marshall will be quite illuminating for the both of us. Is that everything? Yes, Mr. Litch. You're dismissed. Keep me updated on the progress, he said, now waving her off. Turning, she walked from the room and back to her desk. There were hours of video and audio she needed to prepare for. Marshall was at his wits' end with all of it. Fiona especially. He knew washing Ari this much could be bad for her skin. He was more than aware this could cause a rash, but he couldn't stand listening to her heart-wrenching sobs. She sounded so frustrated, so upset, and it was breaking her heart. Deciding to compromise, rather than filling the tub again with soap and water, Marshall brought Arya to the sink where he began stripping her of the pajamas she was in. Running the water and adjusting the temperature, he pulled the diaper off, holding her under the gentle flow of water. As he began washing arms and back down, he listened as her tears lessened, and turning her, he rinsed her tummy, being sure to get her legs as well. Realizing he had no towel, Marshall pulled his shirt off, wrapping her in it as he shut the water off. The house was silent for the first time in hours. It was deafeningly quiet. Walking from the kitchen, Marshall didn't bother with even attempting to clothe her. Instead, he lay right on the couch, Arya asleep in moments, and Marshall quick to follow. Fiona sat at the top of the stairs watching them. Marshall, she knew, was frustrated with her. Everything that had gone on in the last 24 hours had her so on edge, and she'd been more than short with him. She knew that Marshall knew what he was doing, but the way he'd said it, my baby, was like a slap to the face. He'd hurt her with that one, and more so, she knew than he'd intended to. She knew then he'd intend. She knew then he'd intended to. She knew that he'd intended to. She knew that he'd intended to. She'd just gotten off the phone with Simone, and Fiona was more than thankful that she was around to remind her of ways to calm down. This was just a speed bump, and Marshall was being a protective father, just how he was supposed to be. Simone had helped her to see that it wasn't she Marshall was frustrated with, but the situation. Neither of them had gotten much sleep last night, and the mood after she'd found Arya upside down in her carrier had been tense, fraught with worry and concern. The trip to the Aberdeen place had helped, and as the men discussed work over dinner, Fiona had chatted away with Marceline, Arya more than happy in her car seat perched at the table with them. She'd been fine all night, happily babbling away with she and Marcy, even chatting up a storm to Mo and Kate when they got home. She'd only started fussing after they put her to bed, which wasn't abnormal. Usually they'd either put her down asleep or close to it, and when she was awake, she'd whine and whimper for a minute before knocking out. Not this time. Instead, she cried, more and more miserable as the hours passed. Marshall, she knew, could tell she was getting frustrated, and had sent her to bed at 4 in the morning. She at least had gotten a few hours of sleep. Grabbing a diaper, she headed downstairs. The sound of Arya's soft snoring met her ears. The moment she lifted their daughter from his chest, Marshall's eyes opened, meeting hers. Fiona immediately looked away. She couldn't hide the hood in her eyes, and she didn't want to either. It was so tiring always hiding how she felt. I'm sorry. Now she looked back at him, watching as he sat up. I snapped at you last night and earlier today, and I'm sorry. Thank you for apologizing. I know you're only acting like this because you're being protective of Ollie. It's still no excuse to take it out on you. I'm sorry I did. I'm sorry I was getting so frustrating. It's just everything going on scares me, and I know that's no excuse, and I'm trying, Marsh. I'm trying so hard to keep it all together. What if they'd hurt her? What if that guy comes back? Or that guy Mo and Kate were talking about last night? Declan something or other? Yeah, what about that guy? What if it was him? The stuff Kate found was freaky. I'm gonna buy a deadbolt for the back door, and I'm calling a security company to have an alarm system put in. I set up a meeting with Lich today, too, Marshall said, watching as Fiona diapered the baby. Whatever was wrong, it can't be the detergent. Oh, whatever was wrong, it can't be the detergent. She was fine with my shirt. Put her in one of the new outfits in the closet. We haven't touched any of those, so they should be fine, he said, now reaching for and taking Fiona's hand. I love you, and I wouldn't pick any other person on this planet to live this life with, he said softly as Fiona bent down, bringing her lips to his. I love you too, Marshall. I love you so much, and I'm terrified of what we have to lose, Fiona said, giving his hand a squeeze before walking up the stairs. Laying Arya on the changing table, she grabbed an outfit hanging in the closet. Pulling the tags off and giving them a shake, Fiona made sure there was no remaining plastic or anything sharp. Arya was dressed quickly, and debating on placing her in the crib, Fiona decided against it. Instead, she carried her down the stairs, settling on the couch next to Marshall. Fiona lay, leaning against Marshall with Arya on her chest. She could feel her own eyes getting heavy, her hand slowing its gentle rubbing on Arya's back. She could tell Marshall was already asleep by how he leaned against her. Arya's baby lavender scent was absolutely intoxicating, as Fiona nestled her lips to Arya's head, giving her kisses as she did. Her hand stilled, and she could feel herself drifting to sleep. Arya began squirming on her chest. Fiona opened her eyes, looking down at her daughter, and seeing tears had poured over her cheeks, she felt her breath catch. Ari let out a whimpering sob that broke her mother's heart. Screw it, Fiona said, standing now, pulling the clothes from her daughter's body, as her crying grew more desperately insistent. Arya was outright bawling by the time Fiona got all her clothes off. Looking up as she entered the kitchen, she was surprised to see the sink already running, Marshall returning now with a towel. Again, Arya was held under the running water. This time Fiona was the one rinsing her down. She passed her to Marshall, shutting the water off before making her way to the stairs. Marshall watched as Fiona returned with a laundry basket filled with Arya's clothes. I grabbed everything I saw, the sheets, blankets, everything, and I'm washing it. I don't care if it has tags, new labels, or what. I'm washing all of it. It has to be the clothes. She's gonna stay naked for a bit, so I crank the heat. I don't want her getting sick, Fiona said, now removing tags and unfolding and shaking out the laundry, dropping each piece in the washer. Pouring the detergent, she set the temperature so high and let the washer go. She set the temperature to high and let the washer go. Ari had been fine for well over an hour after her last bath, so it had to be the clothes. The thought of them touching her is making my skin crawl, she said, now rubbing her arms as the itching sensation increased. It's literally making. What the hell? Marshall, I think they actually put something in her clothes. I'm all itchy, Fiona said, now turning on the sink, running her arms under the cool water, feeling as the itch abated. Fee, you have a look on your face. He did this to Ari. Rich, his guy, whoever was here last night. They put something in her clothes. Whatever it was made my skin crawl. No wonder she was crying. Marshall, this is his way of telling us he's got no problem doing something to her. He did this to our baby, she said, now looking up at him, fear in her eyes more than obvious. He already told me he has no problem hurting her. I think this is his way of showing us he can. The ding of the elevator caught her attention, and looking up, May watched as Marshall walked towards Litch's office. Standing, she walked to the door, opening it with a smile, waving him inside. Mr. Litch is waiting for you, Marshall. Closing the doors behind him, May sighed. To be a fly on the wall for that meeting. Litch watched as Marshall entered the room. The fury in his eyes was palpable. The doors closed behind him, and as he stormed towards the desk, he remained oblivious to the two security guards who now stood behind him. The moment he squared up at the desk, Litch stood, and Marshall's shoulders were grabbed by the two guards as he was slammed into the seat. He delighted in the look on Marshall's face. If truth were being told, he was still holding on to dead grudges. Marshall had so much more give than his father had. With the problems Marshall Sr. caused, he longed to see the look of panic on his face. It was something he'd never bore witness to, not even the night he shot him. Marshall, did you really think Hunts Aberdeen could save you? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Litch asked, leaning close. What they were planning, he had no idea, but with any luck, Marshall would spill. He watched as the look on Marshall's face changed. He was learning. What do you think we're doing? He asked. What do you think we're doing? He asked, now raising an eyebrow in curiosity. This was a typical Abigail response. Marshall was fishing for information and wanted to know how much he knew. It was a smart move, but one his father used often. I know you're plotting a contractual out, Marshall. I left only one I left only one loophole available on the contract, and if that's what you're using, it's going to cost you all dearly. What do you expect from us? What is it you want? Marshall asked, staring him down. I want everything. More specifically, I'd like your cooperation, considering the fact that you seem to be forgetting that I own you, he said, the anger in his voice barely hidden. That's the illusion, Marshall said with a scoff, still not looking away. You think you have control when you don't have Jack. You have as much control as I do. This isn't a band anymore. We're barely even friends now. You don't own us because there is no us anymore. With everything that's gone on at the rate we're going, we'll be lucky to last the year. The band will dissolve sooner than later, he said, now kicking his feet up on the desk. The air of confidence Marshall exuded spoke volumes. Whatever their plan was, it wasn't what he had anticipated it to be. Now Litch walked around to the front of the desk. I understand how difficult this can be for you, Marshall, watching everything you built from the ground up dissolve in your hands. It must be frustrating, like an itch you can't scratch. The rage flashed in Marshall's eyes, and Litch knew he struck a nerve. Marshall made to stand, but was held down again by security. Did you think I was lying? Did you truly believe that I'm above using your daughter to get you to bend to my will? He asked, now leaning close. Fall in line, or you'll wish you had. Don't think I won't start with her. If there was anything Litch was proud of, it was his ability to keep a straight face, despite the circumstances. This time Marshall stood, pulling the two security guards with him as he lunged for him, just barely missing as they pulled him back. Stay the hell away from my kid! Marshall growled, the rage pouring off of him as he continued staring him down. Security, he could see, was struggling to contain him. It was time to start wrapping things up. Anything that happens to your daughter will be a direct result of your own actions, he responded as Marshall once again stood, pulling the two men with him. If you so much as even look at her wrong, I'll end you. I'll gladly watch the life leave your eyes to keep her safe. Threatening me is one thing. Threatening my child is a completely different story, he said, glaring at him. Your father once said the same thing to me. I hope you've learned from his mistakes, or history will be forced to repeat itself, Litch said as he walked away from him, towards the windows behind his desk. At this point, Marshall was no longer worth his time. Gentlemen, see Marshall out of the building. This meeting has concluded. He could hear the ensuing scuffle as Marshall was turned and brought from the room to the elevator. Once he heard the office doors close, he turned, sitting down at the desk. Pressing the intercom button, he waited for only the briefest of moments before a voice responded. Mr. Litch? Put all incoming calls on hold. When that's finished, come see me. I wish to discuss your future with us, he said, disconnecting the call and dialing out again. Yes, Mr. Litch? I'd like the dossier of Declan's failures. I know you have one. I'd also like anything you have on what you've accomplished in the last 2 days. I need this immediately. You'll have it before he arrives. Anything else? Yes, as a matter of fact, there is. See me before you go. I want you to hit them all. Use your discretion as to how. Find Flint and see where it is he's been holing up. I want them all scared come Thursday. Trust me, Mr. Litch. Come Thursday, there will be. This will be an opportunity for you to prove yourself. I'll be speaking with Declan shortly and giving him this same job. Prove yourself to me and show him how it's done. I will. I'll get started on those documents for you now. Good. That will be all. Once again, Litch hung up the phone, and rising from his desk, he walked over to the cabinet, pulling out a decanter filled with whiskey and a glass. Pouring out a measure, he looked out, admiring the view of the city after dark. He'd finished his drink, and as he refilled his glass, a knocking came to his door. Once again it opened, and May entered. I brought both dossiers for you, Mr. Litch. Thank you, May. Put them on my desk. Is it outlandish of me to assume you've kept the same work ethic and have anything to report? I know where every one of them is currently residing. I used our source in the police station and used the city's CCTV to track them down. And how has Mr. Flint and his lovely new bride been flying under our radar? They've been staying at her father's house. You are aware, Mr. Litch, who her father is, are you not? I was made aware only of his nuptials and her name. Now he turned to face her. Who is she? The daughter of Hudson Aberdeen. And you believe the Aberdeen home is where they're residing? No, I confirmed it. During my lunch today, I placed a few more trackers. I went to Nightosphere to see if any of them was there. I ended up following his truck. I plan on following her moves. I feel she'll be most useful. What do we know about her? Her previous relationship with Ashton Graham's a big one. He's the one with the ill mother, is he not? That's correct. Let's get him on our side. Reach out and see what you can learn of her condition, and let's see if we can't find someone who can figure out what's wrong. All on us, naturally. Learn how their relationship ended as well. There has to be something useful there. Wait, they're going to try and get Ash on their side? Uh-oh. He watched, staring as she nodded. Is there anything else you need from me before I leave for the evening, Mr. Litch? Nothing. I'll expect daily reports from you. Now leave me. Yes, Mr. Litch. Turning, May walked from the room, and as she made to close the door, it was pried from her hand as she was elbowed aside. Get out of my way. I have a meeting. She could do nothing but glare as he walked by. She couldn't stand that man. He'd watched through the reflection of the glass as Declan entered the room. Litch stood in silence, watching as he waited to be acknowledged. I must say, Declan, it's been a long time since I've fallen for promises of grandeur and whispered sweet nothings. You claim to be called the Demon Cat of 23rd Street. You claim to have a background worthy of the position I put you into, Litch said, now turning to face the man who stood before him. Yet in the last 24 hours, your job has been done better and with more finesse and elegance by a person barely older than a child. Do tell, what am I paying you for? I think you grossly underestimate the mess I inherited when I signed on with your organization. I think you also forget what my presence brings to the table. Your presence has been described to have the elegance of a smash and grab, and I'm inclined to agree. Lich said now as he asked to his desk, lifting a folder. As he asked to his desk, lifting a folder. What? This is a current list of your failures and the corrective actions that have been taken to repair the damages and loose ends you've caused and left. This month alone, you've cost us over $6,000 with lost technology. Only a small portion of that was able to be recovered, he said, now flipping through the documents. Taking Lich's silence as an opportunity, Declan spoke. I never overstated my reputation or my abilities. Let me do things by myself. I realize having a team allows you to get things done faster, but I work better alone, he said, watching as Lich stared him down, his gaze unwavering. Get me address confirmation for every one of the band members, information on their partners, and vulnerabilities they have. I want to know where they're staying exactly. Specifically Flint. He's always been one that's been hard to get a position on. Get me those by tomorrow morning, and if you don't have it, don't bother returning. Now get out. Lich watched as the man before him nodded. Turning, he walked from the room. The Lich had decided was how he was going to determine things. This Lich had decided was how he was going to determine things. Declan was a valuable resource when they had bodies to move. With things at a standstill, he was proving to be more of a liability than an asset. If he could show up with the information he wanted to hear, then he could prove he had some use to him after all. Okay, and the author said, enjoy the chapter. Did you guys enjoy a chapter from the perspective of some of the bad guys? Let me know what you think. The story, I feel, is starting to come to a close, and I'd love to know how you all are feeling about everything XOXO. Okay, HO9. What does that mean? Okay, there aren't that many chapters left. We're like almost at the end. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 chapters left. Okay, that's crazy. Um, I think, I'm not sure if, like, there hasn't been an update in a real long time. Like, the last chapter says it's called Bad Blood, and I haven't seen any chapters past that for, like, months, so I think that might be the end of the book. So it looks like we're reaching the end. We're getting close, you guys. I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna, like, hatch things out. I have to, I have to figure out um, how I'm gonna like portion things out upload wise, like how many chapters I'm gonna put into certain videos. In the meantime, I'm gonna watch Fiona and Cake, and I might upload this tomorrow and not today because I don't really feel like doing any editing tonight. So that was a shorter chapter. I was really happy about that. But also it looks like the uh the Lich is coming back with all his, craziness, and this time he's gonna try and get Ash to join their side. That's gonna be a big problem, especially, I mean, Ash has shown himself to be, like, he's been abusive and he's been kind of an asshole in the past, but, like, I don't think he's particularly a bad person. Um, and I think he's trying to better himself, which is nice. So I'm just hoping that he doesn't join the bad guy's side. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. I may have misunderstood that. But anyway, I love each and every one of you guys. Please don't forget to always be yourself. You are valid. Don't forget to be good to yourself and to others. And I will see all you guys in the next video. Bye.